The first thing Mara learned about the Elthar Strategic Academy was that the walls had opinions. They hummed in her head before she even saw the building. It started on the shuttle down, just a faint pressure behind her eyes, like an oncoming headache that hadn't made up its mind yet. The other candidates didn't seem bothered. A Koran boy with translucent skin was asleep, twitching in time with some dream. A tall, four-armed Quoven flipped through a holoslate with 4 sets of eyes scanning different columns of text at once. A feathered, insectile thing in the back clicked quietly to itself, mandibles moving in some silent recitation. Only Mara rubbed the bridge of her nose and tried not to wince. "We're inside the outer lattice," the shuttle AI announced cheerfully. "Residual resonance from the Academy's thoughtnet may cause temporary discomfort. This is normal and harmless." "Normal for who?" Mara muttered. The Quoven across the aisle glanced up. "You're Terran, right?" "Last time I checked," she said. He studied her, head tilting. Never met one in person. The file said your species was inconsistent." "Flattering," Mara said. "You all getting the migraine too, or is that just me?" His upper hands tapped his temples. "Feels like a warm buzz, like standing near a power relay. Not painful." "Lucky you," she said. The shuttle shuddered as it broke through the last layer of atmospheric shielding. Below, the Academy floated above the planet's surface like an enormous fractured ring, segments of stone and metal suspended in a web of faintly glowing lines. Thoughtnet conduits, Mara guessed. The thing that was making her nerves hiss. The PA chimed again. "All candidates, upon disembarkation you will proceed directly to Orientation Hall 3 for your preliminary assessment. Failure to comply will be taken as an early indicator that you don't belong here," the Quoven finished, grinning. They really like saying that part. "You've been here before?" Mara asked. "My cousin washed out second year," he said. "Claims it was politics. The evaluation system claims it was insufficient cognitive flexibility under stress." He offered a lower hand. "Core, strategic engineering track. You?" She shook it. His palm was warm and dry, grip careful like he thought she might break. "Mara Rios, Terran, tactical analysis, or I will be, if they don't kick me out in the first 10 minutes. Core's upper shoulders lifted in a Quoven shrug. "If you survive the preliminary assessment, they assume you are at least interesting. They like interesting." Mara wasn't sure interesting was what she wanted to be to a place like this, but it was too late to change her mind now. The shuttle docked with a soft, magnetic thump. The hangar was enormous, echoing, full of candidates trying not to look nervous. Species from a dozen worlds brushed past her, scaled, feathered, furred, plated. The thoughtnet hum grew stronger as they got closer to the inner corridors, a low static at the edges of her thoughts. At the entrance to Orientation Hall 3, a figure in black and silver robes stood beside a tall arch woven from translucent material that pulsed with faint light. The figure's head was masked in shifting glass, reflecting 100 warped faces at once. "Dean of Admission," Core whispered. "Stay calm. They can taste fear, kidding. Mostly." The Dean's voice carried without amplification, smooth and measured. "Welcome to the Elthar Strategic Academy. You are here because you have been identified as possessing above-average aptitude in at least one of the disciplines we cultivate: perception, influence, analysis, resilience. Today, we will determine whether those aptitudes can be integrated into the network that makes this institution possible." A ripple of unease moved through the gathered candidates. "The thoughtnet is the Academy's heart," the Dean continued, "a shared field of resonance. When you are within its reach, you are never truly alone. We monitor your stress levels, your cognitive load, your emotional stability. We do this to keep you alive." Mara's headache pulsed like it disagreed. Your first task is simple, the dean said. You will step through the gate. The ThoughtNet will greet you. We will observe the interaction. Then we will decide whether you stay. A murmur rose. Someone asked if it would hurt. The dean considered. Discomfort is not the same as harm, they said. Proceed when your name is called. Names began to scroll in the air above the arch in a dozen scripts. Quarren, Jalev. A nervous-looking Quarren stepped forward, skin brightening along his cheekbones. As he approached, the translucent arch flared with soft blue light. When he passed beneath it, the light spider-webbed out into the air above the hall, forming a holographic lattice, a rough outline of a humanoid figure threaded with color. On the side wall, several large displays showed graphs and models updating in real time. Baseline emotional activity within expected parameters, a disembodied voice announced. Receptivity, high. Cognitive resistance, moderate. Compatibility, acceptable. Jalev emerged on the other side, looking dazed but intact. The dean inclined their head. You may proceed to the seating. One by one, candidates walked through. A feathered veil toured under the arch. The lattice flared in sharp spikes of color. Receptivity, very high. Cognitive resistance, low. Recommend early training in boundary setting. A quadrupedal Solari padded through. The field wrapped around them like mist. Baseline emotional signature stable. Perceptive bandwidth excellent. Latent projection capacity detected. Everything was neatly labeled, charted, slotted into boxes. Mara watched the patterns more than the people. Watched the way the holographic lattice adapted to each new nervous system. Never quite the same, twice, but always recognizably something. A wave function. A fingerprint. A song. Her name appeared on the list halfway through. Rios, Mara, Tehran. The hum behind her eyes sharpened, like the ThoughtNet was paying closer attention. She walked toward the gate. Up close, the arch didn't look like stone or metal or organic tissue. It looked layered, as if someone had taken a concept, connection, and built it into 3 dimensions. The air under it shimmered just a little, as though hot, though the hall was cool. It won't physically injure you, Kor whispered behind her. Probably. Comforting, she said, and stepped forward. The shimmer passed over her skin like stepping through a waterfall that wasn't wet. For an instant, she felt herself laid out in vectors and numbers, heart rate, breath, the micro-tremors of muscle under skin. 100 tiny measures she never thought about. Then something else pressed against her. Not quite a voice, not quite a touch. Expectation. Hello, she thought reflexively. The pressure faltered. The arch dimmed. Above the hall, the lattice flickered, and then did something Mara hadn't seen it do for anyone else. It went black, not off, exactly. The structure was still there, a wireframe silhouette hanging in the air. But the usual colors, emotion, thought, receptive fields, all of that vanished. The wireframe turned into a hollow outline. On the side wall, the graphs stopped updating. Silence dropped over the hall, like a weighted curtain. ThoughtNet connection anomaly, the disembodied voice said, sounding less smooth than before. Attempting recalibration. The arch pulsed. Mara felt another push, deeper this time. A probe searching for feedback. She didn't mean to push back. It was reflex, like flinching from a hot stove. The thing pressed inward, and she braced. The pressure met the brace and slid off. The lattice stayed black. In the observation gallery high above the floor, 6 figures watched the displays with differing degrees of alarm. That's not supposed to happen, said a slim being with fractal horns and silver irises. Professor Helven, specialist in group cognition. Your insight is, as always, Invaluable, murmured Administrator Shael, whose glass mask showed a faint reflection of the empty wireframe. Could be a hardware fault, another suggested. The gate hasn't been fully recalibrated since the last intake. Hardware faults don't produce stable interference fields, Helvin snapped. He pointed at the main graph. Look, it's not just blank. It's rejecting input. The net is reading a continuous signal, but it can't resolve it into emotional or cognitive data. On the screen, lines of error code scrolled rapidly, most of them some version of no match, pattern not found. Species? Shael asked. Terran, someone replied. Humans. Newer addition to the register. Limited dataset. Designated. Let me see. They flicked through a file. Behaviorally variable. High adaptability. Emotional range large. Cultural frameworks diverse. Threat classification. Under review. Under review, Helvin repeated, dryly. How comforting. They all watched as the system tried again. Secondary pulse, the disembodied voice said. Calibration sweep engaged. In the hall, the arch brightened. Mara's vision stuttered for half a second. The pressure behind her eyes spiked, then eased. Above her, the holographic outline flashed, once, twice, and for a heart-stopping moment, color began to bloom inside it. A faint wash of muted green near what would be the chest. A flicker of sharp red at the edges like irritation. Then everything collapsed back to black. The thoughtnet fell silent. Connection failure? Shael asked. Helvin shook his head slowly. No, connection. Blocked. From the client side. You're saying the candidate is doing this, one of the others demanded. No untrained mind can shut out the net completely. It's impossible. If you quote that word at me one more time, Helvin said tightly, I will assign you 3 semesters of reading on the history of failed absolutes. Regardless, Shael said, before the argument could escalate, we have an anomaly in the gate during intake, and an entire hall of candidates watching it. Down below, Mara stood very still under the arch, aware of hundreds of eyes on her. The humming in the walls had subsided to a distant buzz, like a storm on the other side of a mountain. Is something wrong? She called up, because no one had told her to move yet. The dean tilted their masked head, as if listening to a voice only they could hear. Remain where you are, Candidate Rios. Not going anywhere, Mara said under her breath. She could feel something brushing at the edge of her thoughts now, like fingers testing the seams of a door. It wasn't invasive, not exactly. More insistent, curious. She tightened the mental habits that had gotten her through the siege of Kalen Station. Focus on her breathing. Label the sensations. Pressure. Brightness. Ache. Don't follow them. Don't invite them in. The pressure slipped, skittered, failed to find purchase. The arch dimmed further, almost to transparency. Third sweep? One of the observers suggested. If we force more power through that channel, we risk damaging both the gate and the candidate, Helvin said. Our mandate does not include lobotomizing incoming students on the first day. So what do you propose? Helvin studied the readings. The net registers her as a continuous interference source. There is a pattern, but it isn't matching any of our maps. I suggest we change the question. Shael's mask turned toward him. Meaning? Stop asking, why can't we read her? And start asking, what does it take for her to let us? Shael considered, then touched a control on their armrest. In the hall, the dean spoke again. Candidate Rios, you may step clear of the gate. Mara didn't wait to be asked twice. She walked out from under the arch and exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. As she moved away, the shimmer faded. The hum in her skull eased back to its previous low annoyance, like tinnitus instead of a migraine. The lattice above the hall remained, a hollow outline, completely black. On the display wall, a final line of text appeared beneath the failed graphs. Signal status, persistent interference, risk category, undefined. Recommended protocol, close monitoring. Core waved frantically from the seating tiers. Mara made her way up, ignoring the way conversations dipped as she passed. "What was that?" Core hissed when she dropped into the seat beside him. "You were in there for much longer than the others." "Gate didn't like me," Mara said lightly. "We're working on our relationship." "Your lattice was empty," he said. "I've never seen that. It's supposed to show something." "Well, maybe I'm just boring," she said. Core's upper hands made a disbelieving twist. "I do not think boring is the word the faculty are using right now." On the floor, the next candidate, a compact, furred creature from a high-gravity world, stepped through. The arch glowed normally. Color flooded the lattice. The displays resumed their smooth, scrolling metrics as if nothing had happened. The hall exhaled. Whatever Mara had done, or not done, was officially being treated as an aberration to be ignored. The problem, she'd learned long ago, was that aberrations didn't stay ignored forever. In the debrief chamber behind the observation gallery, the lights shifted to a softer spectrum as the door sealed. The data feeds continued to run in the air, candidate after candidate, clean and readable and comfortably categorized. Except for one wireframe, looping on repeat, hollow, black. "Terran," Administrator Shael said, calling up the species file. A compact dossier appeared. Physiology, basic psychology, a few attached reports from other institutions. Half the markers glowed yellow for incomplete data. "Recent addition to the Alliance," Helvin said. "Most of their development has been insular. Their homeworld's environment is notoriously aggressive. High predator diversity, frequent natural disasters, cultural tendency toward localized conflict. Fascinating species." "Fascinating is not a metric," one of the other faculty muttered. "It is if you're me," Helvin said absently. "Look at this line." He zoomed in on a small portion of the black wireframe's data stream. Beneath the apparent nothingness, a faint oscillation shimmered. Too subtle for the main display, but visible when magnified. "She's not giving us nothing. She's giving us something we don't know how to parse." "Could it simply be trauma?" another asked. "We've seen severely damaged minds present as flatlines before." "Trauma imprints are noisy," Helvin said. "Jagged. They spike, even when repressed. This is steady, controlled." "Are you suggesting she is doing this deliberately?" Shael asked. Helvin considered. "If it's voluntary, she's the most disciplined, untrained candidate I've ever seen. If it's involuntary, then we're looking at a cognitive structure we haven't modeled yet. Either way, she is not standard." Silence for a moment. The word hung in the air. Not standard. "That could be dangerous," someone said quietly. Shael's mask reflected the looping wireframe. "Elthar was not founded to train the standard," they said. "We were founded to understand and direct the exceptional before it destroys itself or others." Helvin inclined his head. "So we keep her?" "We evaluate her," Shael corrected. "We assign an observer, we add flagging to her record, and we do not let one anomaly disrupt intake for the rest." They tapped a command. A new line appeared under Mara's name in the roster. Annotation. Animalia. Special observation required. After the last candidate passed through the gate, the dean dismissed them for a brief recess before the next orientation segment. The hall emptied in a rush of nervous chatter. Mara lingered near the back, where the thoughtnet's hum felt weakest. She leaned against the cool stone and let her shoulders drop. "Candidate Rios?" She straightened. The dean stood a few meters away, mask reflecting her own face back at her in distorted miniature. "Yes," she said. I mean, present. You experienced pain during the gate passage? The dean asked. Headache, she admitted. Nothing serious. Dizziness, disorientation, residual sensory anomalies. No more than usual, she said, then winced. That was a joke, mostly. The dean studied her through the glass. Have you been linked to a shared cognitive field before? Not like this, Mara said. We had basic neural mesh on Kalin Station, shipboard situational nets, low bandwidth, short range. It felt more like static. This feels like someone trying to tune me to their favorite channel. And your response, the dean said, is to refuse the tuning. Mara shifted. With respect, sir, or ma'am, or dean, where I'm from, if you feel something in your head that you didn't invite in, you shut the door. Very fast. A faint chuckle echoed faintly from within the mask. A reasonable instinct. So I didn't break anything? She asked. The gate is intact, the dean said. The thoughtnet is intact. You are intact. Therefore, nothing essential is broken. That's a very administrative answer, Mara said. It is an administrative question, the dean replied. You will find we are a precise institution, Candidate Rios. Imprecise minds do not survive the work we do here. They paused, then added, You will, however, be flagged for additional observation during your first term. Because your psychic Wi-Fi can't read me, Mara said. The dean tilted their head. Because you present an unusual interaction with our core infrastructure. This is neither inherently good nor inherently bad. It is informative. Informative, she repeated. You came here to learn, the dean said. So did we. They turned away. Report to Orientation Hall 1 in 15 minutes. Do try not to get lost in the corridors. The thoughtnet becomes displeased when we misplace people. Does it throw a tantrum? Mara asked, before she could stop herself. Only if they die, the dean said without turning back. Mara watched them go. In the vaulted ceiling above, faint lines of light traced the academy's inner web, pulsing in slow rhythm with hundreds of distant heartbeats. The hum settled around her again, cautious now, like a creature testing the air. She reached up, touched her temple, and thought very clearly, for no one in particular. I'm not here to be a problem. I'm just here to survive the semester. The hum shivered. High in the system's invisible architecture, a diagnostic subroutine finalized its report on Candidate Rios, Mara. Species, Terran. Signal class, stable interference, interpretive. Confidence, low recommendation, observe from safe distance. The thoughtnet didn't know what she was. For the moment, that meant neither did anyone else. Strangled echoes. The first official class at Eltar was called TE, Foundations of Collective Perception, which Mara privately thought sounded like the title of a very boring religious tract. It was held in a circular chamber deep in the academy's core, where the walls were more thoughtnet than stone. Threads of light pulsed just beneath the surface, brightening and dimming in slow waves, like the room was breathing. Take your seats anywhere, the instructor said, floating a few centimeters above the floor. Mara needed a moment to process that. The instructor's body was long and translucent, like a ribbon of glass filled with drifting sparks. Faint fins rippled along their sides, catching currents no one else could feel. A cluster of gemstones at one end served as a face, sort of, though Mara couldn't tell which way they were looking. I am Instructor Vel, the being said, their voice echoing directly in everyone's ears without moving whatever counted as a mouth. I will be guiding your initial acclimation to the thoughtnet's shared fields. Kor nudged Mara with an elbow. Vesen species, he whispered. Fluid phase cognitive structures. They exist in partial superposition with low-level mental fields. Which means, Mara muttered back, which means they're very good at this, and you should not think anything rude, Kor said. Too late, Mara said under her breath. They settled on cushions spaced evenly around the room. The floor was warm through the fabric of her uniform, humming faintly with the net's idle activity. Today, Vel said, spiraling gently in the air, we will begin with asynchronous resonance. Feeling the group's emotional baseline. No deep dives, no memory exchange. Think of it as learning to hear the room breathe. Mara tried not to think of the room breathing at all. The last time she'd been inside a sealed structure where she could hear it breathe, the structure had been a siege bunker under orbital bombardment. Most of you, Vel continued, have some experience with local meshes, shipboard nets, family clusters, civic mood regulators. The thought net is broader, deeper, but the principles are the same. You open, you receive, you stabilize. They coiled in midair, their spark-filled body dimming, then brightening with each word. Close your eyes, they said. Focus on your breath. Do not reach for the net. Let it touch you. Mara closed her eyes. Kor exhaled slowly beside her. Somewhere to her left, a candidate with delicate chimes braided into their hair made a soft, nervous sound. Someone's tail thumped twice against the cushion, then went still. The hum in the walls rose, became a tone just below hearing. It brushed against Mara's awareness like warm air through an open door. She did not move toward it. Notice what is yours, Vel's voice said, wrapping around her thoughts. The feel of your own heart, the shape of your breathing, the weight of your body. Anchor there. Mara anchored. Collins Station's emergency drills had taught her well. Anchor in the body. Name what's real. Stay present. Now, Vel said, allow your awareness to soften at the edges, like widening your hearing. You are not leaving yourself. You are simply listening farther. The pressure nudged at her again. Not hard, not invasive, just expectant. Around her, something shifted. It wasn't sound. It wasn't thought. It was more like suddenly noticing that the air had a flavor, a nervous tang from the Korin 2 cushions down, a sharp, bright excitement from a Sillery whose claws tapped an impatient pattern on the floor. Kor's familiar, thoughtful buzz, like an engine turning over new ideas. Mara felt them without reaching. The net was carrying their emotional signatures, weaving them into a background field. It wasn't deep, just a general sense of the room's surface mood, but it was unmistakable. Good, Vel murmured. This is the collective baseline. If your own state diverges sharply, you will feel that as well. The net exists to help you recognize when your perceptions are out of sync. Out of sync. Mara almost laughed. And now, Vel said, we will briefly raise the resonance. I will amplify the field. You will allow your awareness to follow, but do not push. Let the net carry you. The hum thickened. Mara felt a flicker of unease that wasn't hers. Someone worrying they were doing it wrong. A wash of curiosity. A spike of momentary claustrophobia that quickly smoothed out as the group stabilized. And then, as the resonance climbed, she felt something else. A hole. Not empty. More like a patch of black glass in a field of soft cloth. The net flowed around it with visible reluctance, currents bending away. And at the same time, she realized with a small, sinking twist that she was sitting at the center of that hole. Maintain your anchors, Vel reminded them. You are feeling each other, not becoming each other. The group does not erase the individual. Mara's anchor held. Breath, heartbeat, the steady count in her head. The net pressed closer, a tide rising around a rock. It slid off her again. She could feel everyone else. She could not feel the net touching her back. The dissonance was subtle but unnerving, like listening to a conversation through a wall and realizing none of the voices ever paused for you. To her right, someone made a soft sound, a muffled gasp. "Breathe," Vel said immediately. "Who is tightening? Raise your hand if you feel pressure." A hand went up 3 cushions away. Mara cracked one eye. It was a slender, blue-skinned being with faceted eyes and long, flexible tendrils instead of hair. Mara remembered seeing them at the gate, their lattice blazing with bright yellows and oranges. Right now, their tendrils were wrapped so tightly around their own arms that the skin beneath was blanching. They said, voice strained. "There's something." Vel drifted toward them, body dimming further, like they were pulling some of their light inward. "What are you experiencing, Cadet Lin?" Vel asked gently. Lin's faceted eyes flicked around the circle, then landed on Mara. "It's like," Lin swallowed. "There's a gap, a silence, but it's not quiet. It's heavy. I keep sliding off it. It hurts." A low murmur rippled through the group. "Eyes closed," Vel said sharply. "Everyone, do not follow Lin's focus. Maintain your own anchors." Mara shut her eyes again. Great, she thought. I'm giving people psychic migraines now. That's new. "Cadet Lin," Vel said, softer. "Your sensitivity is very high. You are latching on to the anomaly instead of the field. Shift your focus. Can you feel my presence?" The air tingled. Even Mara could feel the instructor's attention narrowing, compressing like a beam. "Yes," Lin whispered. "You're clear." "Good. Stay with that. The anomaly exists, but it is not your responsibility to resolve it. Let it remain at the edge of your awareness." Mara tried to shrink, mentally, like making herself a smaller target. The net had refused to land on her anyway. After a few long breaths, Lin's grip on their own arms loosened. "Better?" Vel asked. "A little," Lin said. "It's still there, though." "It will be," Vel said, "like a stone in a river. But if you keep trying to move the stone with your bare mind, you will drown before it shifts." A few candidates chuckled nervously. "Class dismissed," Vel said abruptly. "We will resume tomorrow with smaller groupings. Some of you will adapt more quickly than others. There is no merit badge for sprinting into a wall." The hum of the net eased off like someone turning down a volume knob. Mara opened her eyes. Candidates were already looking at her. Not openly hostile, not yet, but wary. Curious in that specific way that said, problem, not friend. Kor gave her a look that was part apology, part fascination. "So," he said under his breath, "that happened." "I noticed," Mara said. Lin stood carefully, tendrils slowly uncurling. They avoided looking in her direction. Mara considered going over, saying something like, "Sorry for being psychic sandpaper." But the words died before they reached her tongue. What was she supposed to do? Apologize for existing? Instead, she followed Kor out. In the corridor, the walls thrummed with a lower pulse, the net's attention turned elsewhere. Students flowed around them, a swirl of colors and shapes. "Are all your classes going to be like that?" Kor asked. "I sincerely hope not," Mara said. "I don't have enough headache medication." "Maybe it's a calibration issue," Kor said. "They adjust for species differences all the time." "My cousin said." "Said what?" asked a dry voice from behind them. Mara turned. The being addressing them was tall and narrow, with skin the color of smoked glass, and a pattern of faintly glowing lines running up their arms like circuit diagrams. Their eyes were a flat, reflective black, taking in everything without seeming to focus on anything. "Professor Helvin," Kor said, suddenly very straight. "I was just speculating about academy infrastructure without data," Helvin finished, "as is the age-old tradition of students everywhere." Kor's lower arms folded guiltily. "Yes, Professor." Helvin's gaze flicked to Mara. Cadet Rios, they said. Walk with me. Kor shot her a helpless look. Mara shrugged, as if this were all perfectly normal, and fell into step beside Helvin. They moved through corridors that curved in ways Mara's inner ear didn't entirely approve of. The further they went, the more the walls shifted from simple stone to layered conduits, thoughtnet veins, glowing in intricate patterns. Your species, Helvin said without preamble, has limited integration with cognitive fields, yes? We don't usually plug our brains into group chats, if that's what you mean, Mara said. Charming image, Helvin murmured, but inaccurate. Neural meshes, emotional regulators, subcortical training loops. Your file suggests you have encountered variants of these. On ships and stations, sure, Mara said. But they're quiet. Background systems. The net here is like standing in the engine room with the casing off. Helvin's mouth twitched, which she suspected was their species' version of a smile. And your instinct is to put the casing back on. Where I grew up, Mara said, if something reaches into your head without knocking, it's either a malfunction or an attack. Interesting, Helvin said. What about when something reaches out from your head? Do you consider that an attack as well? She glanced at them. Is that your way of asking if I'm dangerous? All sentient minds are dangerous under the right circumstances, Helvin said calmly. I am asking if you know how much of yourself you have. Locked away. Mara looked ahead down the corridor. A group of cadets passed them, conversation flowing mind to mind, as easily as breath, if their distant inward looks were anything to go by. I know enough, she said. Enough to get through. Enough not to break. And how did you determine that threshold? Helvin asked. She thought of Kalen's station again, of the day the shield failed and the emergency bays flooded with screaming, of the way her mind had tried to follow every voice, every sob, and how close she'd come to fracturing down the middle. Trial and error, she said. Mostly error, at first. Helvin was silent for a few steps. The net, they said eventually, is not a neutral environment. It amplifies, harmonizes, bleeds edges together. For many species, that is comforting. For some, it is overwhelming. For a very few, it is repelled. Mara snorted. So I'm allergic to your psychic Wi-Fi. That explains a lot. Helvin didn't quite roll their eyes, but she could feel the impulse. Humor is a blunt instrument, Cadet Rios. Effective at deflecting, less so at illuminating. Works for me, she said. They stopped at a junction. The corridor ahead split into three, each path marked by different symbols and faintly different frequencies of hum. You will continue attending resonance sessions, Helvin said. We will adjust parameters. Smaller groups, lower amplitude. I am not in the habit of giving up on a puzzle. Mara crossed her arms. And if the puzzle doesn't want to be solved? Helvin's gaze sharpened. Then it will still be observed. There it was, the flag in her file made flesh. I am not your enemy, Cadet, Helvin added, voice softening by a degree. But I cannot protect you from a system I do not understand, and right now the ThoughtNet's response to you is unpredictable. That is dangerous for everyone. Unpredictable, Mara repeated. That's one word for it. Do you have another? Helvin asked. She thought of Lynn's pained expression, of the way the net had slid off her like oil on glass. Wrong, she said quietly. It feels wrong. Helvin tilted their head. We will see whether that feeling persists. For now, you have a midday meal to attend and a cohort to meet. I suggest you do not allow the anomaly of your status to become the entirety of your identity. Is that an official directive? She asked. It is a piece of advice from someone who has watched many students define themselves by the one thing that makes them feel special, Helven said. Rarely ends well. They turned down one of the side corridors, leaving her at the junction. The Academy's main refectory was less a room than a compromise. Tables of various heights and shapes floated at adjustable levels. Sections of the floor shifted gravity in subtle gradients. One corner shimmered with a thin, aqueous field for aquatic species. Another glowed with heat lamps intense enough that Mara could feel them from across the room. Food stations curved along the walls, dispensing everything from nutritionally optimized gray paste to something that looked suspiciously like live insects. Mara took a tray and stared at the options until the menu display, not recognizing her indecision as a valid input, defaulted to a Terran-compatible sample platter. It looked edible. Probably. She scanned the room for Core and spotted him at a table with Lynn and a few others from their class. Several chairs around them were empty. As she approached, she caught the tail end of a sentence. "I'm telling you, it's like there's a piece missing from the pattern," one cadet was saying, gesturing with a forked tongue. "Like static, but purposeful." "Static is random," Lynn protested. "This wasn't random. It was like something holding its breath forever." They noticed Mara at the edge of the group. Conversation hiccuped. Core's upper hands rose in an inviting gesture. "Hey, over here." She slid into the empty seat beside him, ignoring the tiny flinch from the cadet on her other side. "Talking about me?" she asked, popping a crunchy, spiced something into her mouth. It tasted like pepper and regret. "We were talking about class," Lynn said stiffly. "And I was there, so technically still about me," Mara said. "Look, I get it. I'm weird. I'm not doing it on purpose." Lynn's tendrils twitched. "You know we can't help what we feel either," they said. "I've trained my whole life to read fields. When there's a hole like that, my mind snaps to it. It hurts." Mara swallowed, the food suddenly sitting heavy in her throat. "I'm not asking you not to notice," she said. "Just don't treat me like I'm a faulty explosive, about to go off." "That is not a comforting metaphor," murmured a dry-voiced Solari across the table. "Not trying to comfort you," Mara said. "Just being accurate." Core looked between them. "Maybe," he said cautiously, "we could agree that everyone here is at least slightly dangerous by definition, and focus on the fact that we're all stuck in the same institution with the same terrifying grading curve." A few reluctant smiles flickered. Lynn exhaled. "I will try," they said finally. "To not stare mentally. It is like being handed a puzzle and told not to look at it." "You and Professor Helven should start a club," Mara said. "I am already in one," Lynn said. "It is called People Who Think Too Much About Patterns. The meetings are very tense." That got an actual laugh from the group. For a few minutes, the conversation shifted to safer topics. Who had been yelled at during orientation, which instructors were rumored to be secretly kind, and which were definitely not, what the rumored second-year trials entailed. Mara listened more than she spoke, grateful to let the noise of other people's worries drown out the persistent sense of being slightly out of phase with the room. She was almost starting to relax when someone at the far end of the table leaned forward. "So," the cadet said. They were tall, with mottled stone-like skin and deep-set eyes. "Is it true your species doesn't have any natural telepaths at all?" Mara stabbed a piece of something green. "Mostly true," she said. "There are a few fringe reports, but nothing you'd call reliable. We do emotions and words the old-fashioned way, badly and out loud." "And you came to a school built on shared mental fields," the Solari said. "That seems optimistic." "Or reckless," the stone-skinned cadet added. "Or," Core said, "necessary. You don't build a strategic academy for easy problems." Mara chewed, swallowed, chose her words carefully. "Back home," she said, "saying we've always done it this way, is usually what people say right before something explodes in their faces. The galaxy runs on the thought net. If humans want a seat at the table, some of us have to learn how the table works. And if the table refuses to recognize you? The Solari asked. Mara smiled thinly. Then we learn how to make noise the old-fashioned way, too. That afternoon's session took place in a smaller chamber, with only 8 cushions arranged in a tight circle. The walls were closer, the hum quieter. Vel hovered in the center again, their spark-filled bodies subdued. Smaller group today, they said. Lower amplitude. We will maintain individual anchors while allowing a light, localized resonance. If at any time you experience pain or distress, say so immediately. Mara sat opposite Lin this time, Core on her left. On her right, a compact, armored being whose name, she kept forgetting, adjusted a chest plate with a quiet click. Eyes closed, Vel said. Breath in, out. Anchor in your own body. Good. Now just enough opening to feel the others. No more than that. The net's presence brushed them like a faint breeze. Mara felt Core's habitual curiosity, Lin's nervous tightness, the armored cadet's guarded alertness. She held her own mind steady, not flinging up walls, just not stepping forward. Better, Vel murmured. Lin? It's there, Lin said, voice low. The gap, but smaller, or I am better at ignoring it. I don't know. Either is acceptable, Vel said. Cadet Rios? I can feel everyone, Mara said. They can't feel me. Same as before. That is not entirely true, Vel said. The net registers your presence. It simply does not interpret it. There is a difference. Feels the same on my end, Mara said. Today, Vel said, I would like you to attempt something different. Not opening fully. Merely loosening your grip in one small place. As if you are unclenching a single hand while keeping the rest of yourself steady. Mara's shoulders tightened. We didn't agree to— You are free to decline, Vel said at once. Consent is not optional in this room. But understand, the longer you remain entirely sealed, the more the net will feel you as a foreign body. Tension accumulates around anomalies. Mara remembered Lin's headache. The word hurts. Fine, she said. I'll try. No promises. None requested, Vel said. The rest of you, maintain your own anchors. Do not reach toward Cadet Rios. If you feel a surge, report it. Do not follow it. Mara shut her eyes. She imagined her mind the way the Kalin station therapists had tried to teach her. A room with doors, most locked, a few cracked for light. For years, every time something awful slammed against those doors, she'd shoved another bar across. She couldn't see them, but she knew they were there. Now, very carefully, she reached for one of the smaller ones. A door that led not to the core nightmares, those stayed buried, but to something mild, something manageable. A memory surfaced, sitting in a maintenance shaft, sharing stolen ration bars with another tech, laughing at a joke that wasn't that funny, because if they didn't laugh, they'd scream. Harmless enough. She put her mental hand on the bar across that door and imagined, easing it a fraction, not opening, just letting a sliver of whatever was behind it leak through. The thought net was waiting. She could feel it, a pressure at the edges, poised like hands ready to catch. She loosened her grip, just a little. The hum in the walls snapped from background to foreground. For a split second, a crack opened, like a hairline fracture in glass, and something on the other side pushed back, not the net, herself. All the things she'd been, holding down, packed tight and compressed, surged toward the opening. Memories, feelings, half-formed thoughts, the echo of fear and stubborn, stupid hope. For an instant, the thought net touched that flood. The room jolted. On the wall behind her closed eyelids, Mara saw a flash of something. Not an image, not exactly. More like the shape of a storm. Lightning without sky. A spiraling pattern of pressure and color she couldn't name. The net recoiled. Every cushion in the circle rattled as several cadets flinched physically. Someone gasped. Somebody else cursed in a language with a lot of hard consonants. "Off!" Vel snapped. "Everyone off the field. Now!" The hum cut. The presence yanked back so abruptly, Mara felt vaguely seasick. She realized she was shaking. Her hands had clenched into fists so tight, her nails bit her palms. "Report," Vel said sharply. "Lynn." "Spiked," Lynn panted. "Like I touched a live wire. It—" They shuddered. It wasn't just her. It was like everything around her for a long time, compressed. "Core?" "Felt pressure," Core said slowly. "Like the room got smaller for a second. Then nothing." "Cadet Rios?" Vel's voice softened. Mara opened her eyes. The others were staring at her again, some with fear, some with wary fascination. Her pulse thudded in her throat. "I did what you asked," she said hoarsely. "I loosened one thing. It almost blew the door off." Vel's sparks flickered uneasily. "That was not your fault. The system's calibration is clearly inadequate for your structure." "Understatement of the year," Mara muttered. "Class adjourned," Vel said. "We will not attempt that again without additional safeguards. Dismissed." The others filed out slowly. Lynn paused near Mara, tendrils twitching. "That," Lynn began, then stopped. "That was loud." "Sorry," Mara said. "I tried to make it a whisper." Lynn hesitated, then said, "I think, maybe, your whispers are just very large." Then they left. Later, alone in a quiet alcove off one of the less-used corridors, Mara leaned her forehead against the bare stone and exhaled. The net was quieter here. Farther from the core conduits, the hum sank to a distant throb, like the ocean heard through walls. She flexed her fingers, noticing for the first time that they were still trembling. "This was a bad idea," she told the stone. "Coming here, letting them stick me in their mind web. All of it." The stone, unhelpfully, did not respond. Above her, thin lines of light traced through the ceiling. A faint tickle brushed her thoughts. Not a probe this time, not exactly. More like curiosity. She closed her eyes and spoke inward, as clearly as she could. "I'm not trying to break you," she thought at the net, on the off chance it was listening. "I just don't know how to do this without breaking me." For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, just at the edge of perception, a tiny flicker of something. Not warm, not cold, not welcoming, not hostile. Simply there. A single data node, somewhere deep in the Academy's substrate, updated its file on Cadet Rios, Mara. Pattern detected, high-density emotional compression, risk factor, unknown, new note, when pressured, subject leaks. Somewhere above, Professor Helvin's terminal chimed softly, registering the anomaly flag. In the alcove, Mara lifted her head, squared her shoulders, and went to find her next class. Hairline fractures. By the end of the week, everyone knew about the room. No one called it by its official name, Cognitive Stress Evaluation Chamber A3, except instructors and administrative AIs. Among cadets, it was just the room, said with the same mix of dread and bravado Mara remembered from fire drills and live fire exercises back home. "It's not that bad," a second year insisted at breakfast, which of course meant it was awful. "They just poke at your worst fears until you crack. Some people cry, some throw up, some pass out. They patch you up after." "Reassuring," Core said, carefully rearranging his food by texture. "Do they at least give you the survey beforehand? You know, On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to fall apart if we show you X? Pretty sure that's the test, someone else said. Mara pushed her tray away, appetite vanishing. The thought net hummed at the edges of her awareness, more subdued since the incident in Vel's class, but never entirely gone. She could feel it grazing past her like a herd of distant animals giving a suspected predator a wide berth. Her name was on the list for the afternoon block. Maybe they'll skip you, Core said when he saw her schedule. You know, on account of the interference issue. Maybe they'll shove me in twice just to compensate, Mara said. Equal opportunity trauma. Core's lower hands made an uneasy twist. You could file a medical delay, talk to the psych division, say you're not ready. Everyone here thinks they're not ready, Mara said. That's why it's a test. She didn't add, if I start asking for special treatment now, they'll never stop looking for reasons to sideline me. The room was smaller than she expected. From the outside, it looked like a featureless cylinder sunk into the floor, ringed with consoles and observation stations. Thin bands of light traced around it at regular intervals, indicating the fields were active. Mara arrived with a group of 10 other first years. Lynn was there, looking pale in a way that didn't seem related to pigment. The armored cadet, whose name she still couldn't remember, stood stiffly, arms folded across their chest plate. A plenary, with translucent membranes fluttering between elongated fingers, stared wide-eyed at the chamber door. An instructor in plain gray, a tiverche with segmented limbs and a faintly metallic smell, stepped forward. I am Dr. Wren, they said. Their voice clicked slightly on certain consonants. I oversee cognitive resilience evaluations. You are all here because within the next year, you will be exposed to scenarios that will test you beyond your current limits. We would prefer that you do not shatter the first time that happens. The plenary made a small noise. The room generates personalized stress environments, Wren continued. It uses a combination of your intake data, species-typical triggers, and ThoughtNet feedback to build an appropriate scenario. You will not be physically harmed. If your distress exceeds safe thresholds, the system will terminate the simulation. Mara raised a hand before she could think better of it. Question. What happens if the ThoughtNet can't read those thresholds? Wren's gaze flicked to her. Their compound eyes were hard to interpret, but the tiny paws said they knew exactly who she was. There are redundant systems, Wren said. Biometric sensors, neural activity scans, manual observation. You will not be left to drown, Cadet Rios. Good to know, Mara said. That was an abstract concern. Definitely not personal. A few cadets snorted. Lynn did not. You will each go in alone, Wren said. The others will wait outside. Do not attempt to observe each other's sessions in progress. Doing so invalidates the test and creates contamination. They gestured to the door. Volunteers? Silence. Wren's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Very well. We will proceed alphabetically. Mara relaxed a fraction. Rios put her firmly in the second half. Plenty of time to watch everyone else come out, to decide which version of falling apart looked least embarrassing. The first cadet went in, a Solari, and the door sealed with a soft hiss. Above the chamber, a ring of flattened screens flickered to life, visible from the observation tier, but not from the floor. On them, Mara could just make out moving shapes, color-coded overlays, rolling graphs. The instructor at the central console watched intently, tapping notes into a pad. Core elbowed her gently. Don't stare, he murmured. You'll just psych yourself out. Too late, Mara said. The Solari was in there for 6 minutes. When they came out, their fur was damp and their eyes were bright with unshed tears. Their metrics appeared briefly on a side panel before being filed away. Stress threshold, high, recovery curve, moderate, Intervention required no. Next was Lynn. Mara watched despite herself. On the screens, Lynn's simulation rendered as a shifting maze of corridors and closed doors, each one marked with glowing threads of ThoughtNet connection. Every time they reached for a door, the thread snapped, leaving them alone. The stress graph climbed fast, spiked, then leveled as Lynn employed some practiced breathing. Technique. By the time they emerged, trembling but upright, Mara could see Wren's mandibles set in what passed for approval. Good modulation, Wren told Lynn. You recognized the pattern break and adapted. It still hurt, Lynn said quietly. It will, Wren said. Less, with training. 2 more cadets went in and came out, one shaking, one oddly euphoric, all radiant with the relief of having it over with. Then, Rios, Mara, Terran. Of course. She stood, hands steady at her sides. The hum in the walls thickened a notch, the net's attention focusing like a lens. As she passed Wren, they said quietly, If at any point you feel you are losing your grip, say the word terminate clearly. The system will respond even if the net does not. She nodded. Got it. The door slid open. Cold air washed over her, tinged with antiseptic and the faint ozone of active fields. Inside, the room was simple. A circular space with smooth walls, a single low bench, and a faint grid on the floor. No visible projections, no machinery, just the quiet promise that reality was about to get flexible. Please sit, a neutral voice said. Place your hands on the indicated markers. 2 faintly glowing patches appeared on the bench beside her hips. She sat, palms pressed down, feeling the subtle prickle of sensors under the surface. Initial scan commencing, the voice said. Please breathe normally. She breathed. The first wave of whatever it was rolled over her gently. A sensory sweep, heart rate, skin conductivity, muscle tension. No worse than a medical check, if you ignored the feeling that something intangible was also being measured, like the elasticity of her thoughts. Baseline established, the system said. ThoughtNet interface, partial. Alternate calibration, engaged. Mara snorted. Good luck with that. Humor detected, the system noted. Emotional deflection, moderate. Rude, she muttered. There was a brief pause, as if the room's AI were conferring with unseen colleagues. Scenario generation in progress, it said at last. Stand by, the lights dimmed. The bench softened under her, became something else. The smell of antiseptic thickened, acquired an undercurrent of hot metal and recirculated air. When the floor moved, it did so with a shudder and a whine that was horribly familiar. Mara opened her eyes. She was in a corridor, not the Academy's clean, stone and light corridor. A different one, narrow, cramped, lined with conduits and maintenance panels. The bulkheads vibrated faintly with the thrum of overtaxed engines. Emergency strips glowed dim red overhead. Kalin Station, she thought, or a very good imitation. Her throat tightened. The room's voice, now filtered to sound like the station PA, crackled overhead. All personnel, report to assigned shelters. This is not a drill. Seal all non-essential compartments, all personnel. The words blurred into a high-pitched whine as something slammed the far wall. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Cute, Mara said aloud. Her voice echoed more than it should have. She knew, intellectually, that this was a reconstruction. It couldn't be exact. The Academy didn't have full records of Kalin. It would be working from partial data, her intake interview, species norms for traumatic environment, and the ThoughtNet's limited sample of her emotional signatures. But her body didn't care about the footnotes. Her heart rate climbed. Her hands were empty and itching for tools. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to name what she felt. Fear, anticipation, old muscle memory, spinning up. "I'm not there," she said quietly. "I'm in a chamber on a floating rock run by telepathic overachievers. This is a bad copy of a bad week." The floor shook again, harder. From down the corridor, a child's voice cried out. "Hello?" High, thin, panicked. "Is someone there? Please, my door is stuck." Mara's eyes snapped open. The room had done its homework. The door the voice came from was 3 bulkheads down, jammed half shut, emergency seal lights flashing amber, just like D-17 had been, just like the first door she hadn't been fast enough to get open. Her palms were slick. "Subject stress levels rising," the system murmured, its neutral tone threaded with faux concern. "This is an expected response." "Yeah," she said. "Expected. Great." The sensible thing, the thing the Academy would probably note as healthy boundary setting, would be to stand still, remind herself it was a simulation, and say, "Terminate." Instead, she found herself moving. Of course she did. Her boots hit the grated deck in the same rhythm they had years ago. Her hands closed around the edge of the door, feeling the vibration of the jammed mechanism. "Back away from the opening," she called out. "Because that's what you say, whether it's real or not. I'm going to try to force it." "I can't move," came the voice. "It won't open. There's smoke." The smell hit her then. Burned plastic, overheated circuitry, the metallic tang of blood under it all. Her vision tunneled. For a fraction of a second, a different door overlapped this one. Different angle, different paint scuffs, same screaming behind it. Her shoulders locked. "Anchor," she thought wildly. They told you anchor, name things, stay present. She named door, voice, smell, vibration. She did not name the memory. "Come on," she muttered, bracing her feet. "Come on." She pulled. The door ground against warped tracks. The muscles in her arms screamed. Her heart hammered so loud she could barely hear the overlapping audio. The station PA, the room's monitoring system, the child's cries, the echo of older, sharper screams. Somewhere beyond the illusion, sensors were chewing on the data. Heart rate off the charts, adrenaline surge, motor cortex lit up like a flare, the thought net nibbled at the edges, trying and failing to get purchase on her cascading emotional state. On the observation ring, Dr. Wren's screens filled with jagged lines. Subject Rios entering acute stress response, the room's diagnostics reported. ThoughtNet feed, corrupted. Alternate channels engaged. "Keep recording," Wren said. "She's still functional." Inside, Mara felt something crackle in her chest. Not breaking, more like a fault line flexing under pressure. The door shifted, opened half a hand's width. Hot, smoky air gusted out, stinging her eyes. "Mara." The voice wasn't the room's, wasn't the child's. It came from somewhere sideways, a memory shard bleeding through, a different corridor, a different door, a hand slipping from her fingers. She yanked harder. "Subject approaching dissociative threshold," the diagnostics said. "Recommend intervention." "Wait," another voice said from the consoles. Helvin's, calm and intent. "Watch the pattern." On one screen, a graph that had been spiking wildly began to narrow. The peaks remained high, but their rhythm changed. Less chaotic, more controlled. "Physical exertion is stabilizing her," Helvin noted. "She's channeling." "So she's maintaining function by reenacting unresolved trauma," Wren said dryly. "Reassuring." "Effective," Helvin said. "Not reassuring." Inside, Mara shifted her grip, found a better angle, and shoved her shoulder against the edge. The metal groaned. The gap widened another few centimeters. The child's voice sobbed. "Please, please." "Almost there," Mara said. "Just keep talking. Tell me your name." There was a pause. Then, in a flat, too even tone, the voice said, "Query. Why did you not say terminate?" Mara froze. The smell of smoke thinned, like someone turning down a dial. The vibration in the floor eased. She stared at the gap in the door. The shadowed interior blurred, losing detail. "Because," she said slowly, "that's not what happened." "In the original incident," the room said, and now its voice sounded like itself again. "Records indicate the door failed to open, and 7 individuals in that compartment." "Terminate!" Mara snapped. The corridor vanished. She was back on the bench, hands pressed to smooth surface, lungs heaving. The air in the chamber was cool and clean. No smoke, no vibration, no screaming. A dull pounding had started behind her eyes. "Simulation terminated," the system said. "Collecting data. Please remain seated." She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Do you believe that was an appropriate time to end the scenario?" the system asked, because of course it did. "Yes," she said, "and you can write that in your little report." "Already have," came a different voice over the intercom. Wren's. "Stay where you are, monitoring your vitals." Her hands were shaking. She unclenched them, surprised to see crescent-shaped indentations in her palms where her nails had dug in. Something warm tickled her upper lip. She wiped it with the back of her hand. It came away, smeared red. "Oh, come on," she told the ceiling. "Really?" "Minor capillary rupture," the system said. "Neural activity peaked at—" "Don't," she said. "Finish that sentence, and I'm suing you for medical malpractice." The system wisely fell silent. After a minute, the door hissed open. Wren entered, followed by Helven. Seeing them in the plain gray of medical observers, instead of looming above her behind glass, did not make them any less intimidating. "How do you feel?" Wren asked, scanning her with a handheld device that hummed faintly as it passed. "Like I just lost an argument with a bad memory," Mara said, "and my brain is trying to exit through my nose." "Headache," Wren translated. "Nosebleed, elevated cortisol. Nothing lasting. You remained conscious throughout. No full dissociation." "Congratulations," Helven said. "You scare the room." Mara blinked at them. "That's not on my list of life goals." Helven gestured toward the still active screens. A floating display sprang up beside them, showing a compressed graph of her session, a wild spike upward, a jagged, plateau-like section, then a sudden cut. "Most subjects in acute stress show scattered spikes," Helven said, tracing the middle segment. "Attempts to flee, cognitive fragmentation, generalized panic. You, on the other hand, picked a task and did it," Mara said. "Fix the door. That's what there was to do?" Wren clicked their mandibles. The task was unwinnable. "In the sim," Mara said. "Sure. Out there?" She shrugged one shoulder. "There was always a chance, a stupid tiny chance. You take it or you don't." "And if you don't?" Helven asked quietly. "Then you live with that," she said. "Or you don't. Those are the options." Silence settled for a moment. "Your affect," Wren said eventually, "remains constrained. Minimal overt display. If we looked only at your face, we would not know you were under extreme stress." "Learned that in the bunker," Mara said. "Panic is contagious. So is staying calm, or faking it well enough." "Indeed," Helven murmured. "The net surface reading on you remains almost flat, as if you are skimming along the top of something much deeper." "Trauma imprints are usually noisy," Wren said, half to Helvan. "Hers are compressed." "High-density emotional compression," Helvan said, echoing some note Mara couldn't see. "Specifically regulated to prevent overflow. Effective in the short term. Long-term consequences." They made a non-committal gesture. "TBD. You're talking about me like I'm not here," Mara said. "Apologies," Helven said, not sounding particularly apologetic. Academically, you are fascinating. Practically, you are at risk. Of what? She asked. Cracking? Of your coping structures failing at an inopportune time, Ren said. You are holding too much behind too few doors. Today, you tried to open one safely. The contents nearly knocked you over. That is not sustainable. What do you want me to do? Mara asked, sharper than she meant to. Start screaming every time something reminds me of home? Lie down and sob in the hallway for therapeutic accuracy? I got through it. Isn't that the metric here? Helvin's eyes were intent. Getting through is the minimum requirement, they said. We are interested in whether you can continue to get through without leaving pieces behind. That's a luxury question, Mara said. Where I'm from, we don't always get to keep all the pieces. Ren's mandibles clicked again, softer this time. We are not asking you to dismantle your armor overnight, they said. We are asking you to recognize that armor can hide broken bones until you try to run. They held up the scanner. A holographic image appeared. A stylized brain, nodes lit in different colors. One region at the center glowed with an intensity that made Mara's eyes hurt. This, Ren said, is your amygdala response during the scenario. This, they indicated a surrounding ring of dimmer activity, is your prefrontal regulation. You are holding a wildfire behind a fire break that was not designed for this load. Translation, Helvin said. You are very afraid and very good at pretending you are not. That is useful for a soldier, for a strategist working in shared fields. They spread their hands. We must tread carefully. Mara rubbed her temples. So what now? Do I fail the test? Do I get a stamp on my file that says, too messed up to participate? Ren and Helvin exchanged a look. You pass, Ren said. Functionally. You did not dissociate. You retained situational awareness. You terminated the simulation when it became non-productive. That is a valid success pattern. But, Helvin added, we will be updating your profile. Not to bar you from training, but to inform it. You will be assigned a counselor with clearance to work with high-density cases. You will have the option, note that word, to attend additional integration sessions. And if I decline? She asked. Then you decline, Helvin said. Consent remains non-optional. But the net will continue to feel you as a pressure point. That will affect not only you, but those connected to you. Guilt twisted in her gut, sharp and familiar. She thought of Lynn clutching their own arms, saying it hurts. I'll think about it, she said. That is all we ask, Ren said. For now. Helvin tapped a control. The door hissed open again, revealing the waiting area beyond. As Mara stepped out, she heard Ren say quietly, You realize the Council will want to see this data. They may view her as a prototype, Helvin said, a model for enhancing resilience. Or as a weapon, Ren replied. Put enough pressure on that fire break, and you could aim where it explodes. And that, Helvin said, is why we are here, to ensure they understand that minds are not ordnance. The door closed on the rest of the conversation. The other cadets looked up as Mara rejoined them. Kor's eyes went immediately to the smear under her nose. You're bleeding, he said. Am I? She said, wiping at it. The headache was losing its edge, fading to a dull throb. What did they show you? The plenary asked, wide-eyed. Mara considered lying. An old station, she said finally. A bad day. They wanted to see if I'd run, freeze, or do something stupid. And, Kor asked. She cracked a wry half-smile. You've met me. Which option do you think I picked? Something stupid, Kor said. Something stupid, Lynn echoed softly. Their tendrils twitched. But you're still here? so maybe not completely stupid. Mara shrugged. The room got what it wanted. So did the staff. The net probably has a whole new file labeled Human Bad Ideas, Example 1. Do you regret it? Lynn asked. She thought of the door that had finally shifted, even if only in simulation, of the way her muscles still hummed with remembered effort. Ask me tomorrow, she said, when my head stops trying to escape. They let it go. As they walked back toward the dorms, the ThoughtNet's hum rose and fell around them, carrying the residue of 100 different fears aired and measured in chambers like the one she'd just left. Somewhere in that invisible architecture, a new tag attached itself to Mara's record. Resilience, high coping style, compressive armor recommendation, monitor for hairline fractures. Mara couldn't see the tag, couldn't hear the quiet debates in faculty channels about ethics and potential and risk. All she could feel was the ache in her chest where the simulation had knocked against an old bruise, and the faint, stubborn sense of satisfaction that this time, at least, the door had moved. Silent incursion. The first sign that something was wrong with the ThoughtNet was that it stopped arguing. For days after the room, Mara's sleep came in shallow, unsatisfying layers. Every time she closed her eyes, her body replayed the feel of the jammed door under her hands, the phantom strain in her muscles. When she finally did drop into deeper sleep, it was dreamless, just black, then alarm. On the fourth night, the dreams arrived, but they weren't hers. She woke with her heart pounding and no memory of why, just a lingering sense of motion, like she'd spent hours walking down a hallway that never ended. In the bunk above her, Core muttered something and shifted. Across the room, Lynn made a soft sound, tendrils rustling against their blanket. The lights were dimmed to night mode, a faint blue that left the room in gentle shadow. The hum of the ThoughtNet seeped through the walls, steady as always. Except, Mara frowned and pushed herself up on one elbow, listening. The net usually felt like background static to her, a woven field of other people's emotional noise, blurred into harmlessness by distance and her own stubborn refusal to plug in. Slippery, yes, but with texture. Peaks and valleys as moods rose and fell across the academy. Tonight it felt smooth. Too smooth, like someone had taken sandpaper to a landscape of feelings and shaved down all the edges. She swung her legs over the side of the bunk and dropped lightly to the floor. Core snored very softly, one pair of hands tucked under his chin. Mara padded to the small window slit and pressed her palm to the cool glass. Outside, the Academy's ring sections glowed faintly against the planet's dark curve, ThoughtNet lines etching fine constellations between them. The pattern of pulses was wrong, not in a way she could measure, not without Helven's graphs, but her body knew the rhythm by now. This was slower, more even, like a heart under sedation. You're imagining it, she told herself. You've been here 3 weeks. You are not attuned enough to diagnose a network's mood. Still, she stayed there longer than she meant to, hand on the glass, listening to the quiet. The net did not answer, but it did not argue either. Did you dream? The question came over breakfast, unexpected and oddly casual. Mara looked up from her bowl of something pretending to be porridge. Define dream. Lynn's eyes were glassy in the refectory light. Their tendrils were tied back in a loose knot, but a few ends twitched restlessly. Corridors, they said. The same corridor. Over and over. Doors that don't open. Mara's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Core looked between them. You too? Lynn nodded once. And you? Core's lower hands flexed. I was in a field, my family's cluster farm. Only, it wasn't. The sky was wrong. I could hear the net, but it was loud. I knew I had to reach a relay before something. But every time I ran, the horizon moved away. They shuddered, all four shoulders rippling. Woke up with my heart on fast forward. Mara set the spoon down. I didn't dream anything, she said. Not like that. Just the usual nonsense. Lynn squinted at her, as if trying to focus on something that refused to resolve. You're sure? Trust me, Mara said. If the Academy was serving up shared nightmare programming, I'd remember? Maybe it doesn't work on you, Core said. Maybe it doesn't exist, Mara countered. Maybe you both just had bad nights because Dr. Wren shook your psyches like snow globes. That was last week, Lynn said. This felt different. Different how? Mara asked. Lynn searched for words. Structured, they said finally. Not random. The doors were spaced evenly, the corridor at a perfect angle, the lighting constant. No mind sphere is that tidy. Core nodded slowly. The field in my dream had no weeds, no imperfections. Even the clouds were symmetrically distributed. Mara grimaced. Okay, that is creepy. I tried to shield, Lynn admitted. In the dream, or around the dream. I don't know. It felt like the net was sending it. Why would the net send you nightmares? Mara asked. I thought it was the mental equivalent of a health and safety officer. The net is not an entity, Core said. It's a field, a collection of frameworks. It doesn't want anything. Lynn's tendrils tightened. What if something inside it does? They all fell silent for a moment. The refectory was noisy around them. Hundreds of cadets talking, utensils clinking, the occasional burst of laughter. The thought net hummed beneath it all. Mara realized the smoothness she'd felt last night was still there. People were talking, joking, arguing as usual, but their emotional signatures, where she could sense them, were blunter, less varied, like spices watered down. Look, she said eventually, if this is some kind of new stress protocol, it'll show up on the schedule. Wren loves informed consent, in a very specific, bureaucratic way. And if it isn't? Lynn asked. Then we file a complaint with the universe, Mara said. Until then, we have class. Foundations of collective perception did not go well. Vel floated in the center of the smaller practice room, sparks dimmer than usual. The 8 of them, Mara, Lynn, Core, the armored cadet, and 4 others, sat in their accustomed circle. Today, Vel said, we will not attempt further opening from Cadet Rios. Instead, we will calibrate external modulation recognition. Translation? The armored cadet asked. We practice feeling when something in the field is not us, Vel said, and how to maintain coherence when it occurs. A useful skill even in the absence of recent anomalies. Their sparks flickered uneasily on the last words. Eyes closed, they said. Anchor. Then listen. Mara closed her eyes. She could feel the others settling into their practiced patterns. Breath slowing, muscles loosening. The net brushed them like a cat's tail. Good, Vel murmured. I am now going to introduce a simple, rhythmic pulse into the local field. This will be external, originating from me, not from your own minds. Note how it feels. The hum shifted. It was subtle, but Mara heard it. A faint, steady beat layered under the general noise, like a metronome beneath a symphony. It clicked along, slow and regular. That is me, Vel said. If I increase amplitude. The beat grew louder, more insistent. Mara felt her own breath wanting to match it, to fall into sync. You will notice a tendency to entrain, Vel continued. This is normal. The net is very good at synchronizing. The field throbbed. Mara pulled her breath deliberately out of phase, just a little, enough to feel the pull without yielding to it. Good, Vel said. Now, I will withdraw. Note the return to baseline. The beat faded. The net settled again. Now, Vel said softly, for comparison, we will dip briefly into the Academy's wider field. There has been increased activity today. I want you to feel the difference between deliberate, localized modulation and emergent, large-scale patterns. Mara stiffened. Is that safe? For a few seconds, Vel said. Yes. Lynn, if at any point you feel overwhelmed, signal. Lynn's nerves prickled across the circle. On my mark, Vel said. 3, 2, 1. The world expanded. Mara felt it like the sudden opening of a door into a storm. One moment, her awareness sat in the small practice room, lightly brushing the minds around her. The next, a rush of impressions slammed against the outer edges. Thousands of cadets' surface feelings, stacks of instructors' focused attention, the steady background concern of medical staff and maintenance AIs. It should have been chaotic. Instead, it was smooth. Too smooth again. The chatter of individual minds blurred into a single, low note. There were fluctuations, sure, pockets of anxiety, spikes of amusement, but they all seemed to be pulled toward the same median, flattened toward a common tone. Do you feel it? Vel asked quietly. The uniformity? Yes, Lynn whispered. It's wrong. Describe, Vel said. It's like, Lynn's voice shook, like someone took all the colors and drained them to the same gray. No one's swinging as far as they should. Highs muted, lows muffled. It feels comfortable, but not like a soft hand over your mouth. A shiver went around the circle. Mara felt it too. Not the comfort, the concept of it. A tug toward rest, toward surrender. Why worry when your emotions could be smoothed into something manageable? Why spike when you could settle? Her hackles rose. That's not us? The armored cadet asked. The Academy runs mood regulators in crisis, Kor said. But those are localized. This feels big. This is not a standard regulator pattern, Vel said. Nor is it one of mine. Their sparks dimmed further. Back to local, they said. Now. The storm door slammed shut. The 8 of them dropped back into the smaller field like stones. Several gasped aloud. One cadet swore. Mara opened her eyes. Vel's body coiled. Tightly, their sparks pressed inward. That, they said, is what concerns me. Lynn hugged their knees, breathing hard. It was so tempting, they said, to just let it. I could feel it trying to smooth me out, sand down edges I have spent years learning to sharpen. Kor's upper hands rubbed his forearms as if smoothing away gooseflesh. Who would run something like that, without telling anyone? The Council has not authorized any Academy-wide effective protocol this week, Vel said. I checked. So if it's not you, the armored cadet said slowly, and it's not the Council, then it is either an internal malfunction, Vel said, or an external influence. They glanced at Mara. Mara frowned. Don't look at me. If I had external influence, you'd know. There'd be more swearing. It does not appear to be using you, Vel said. It cannot get a grip. Their attention sharpened. Which suggests you may be the only stable reference point we have. Lucky me, Mara said. The faculty meeting was called under a category Helvin had never seen used in his tenure. Cognitive security compromise. Potential. The circular conference room near the Academy's apex was usually reserved for dry, long-term planning sessions, curriculum revisions, research grant allocations, disciplinary appeals. Today, every seat was filled, and the air vibrated with low-level alarm. Administrator Shael stood at the center, mask opaque. Vel's report is not the only one, they said. In the last 30 hours, we've had multiple independent observations of unusual uniformity in the ThoughtNet's effective layer. Some described it as calming or stabilizing. Others used less flattering terms. Oppressive, someone said. Sticky. Hungry, added Dr. Wren from the far side of the table. Their mandibles clicked. My more sensitive patients feel as though something is pressing down on them. Depressive episodes have shifted toward flatness rather than volatility. Is it a failure in the mood regulator grid? Asked a logistics AI, speaking through a holographic avatar of shifting gears. We had a cascade issue in Sector 9 last cycle. This pattern spans all sectors, Shael said, and all time zones. It does not match any of our built-in regulator templates. They turned to Helvin. Your analysis? Helvin flicked a hand, calling up a series of graphs in the air, lines layered over lines, covering several days' worth of ThoughtNet data. Baseline variability, they said, indicating the early section, has always been relatively high at Elthar. We select for volatility, after all. Ambitious, anxious, competitive minds. The net Ajijat reflects that. However, they shifted the display. New lines overlaid the old, the recent days glowing in a different color. Beginning approximately 32 hours. Ago, we see a dampening effect on amplitude. Peaks and troughs drawn toward median values. It is subtle on the scale of the whole net, but more pronounced if we isolate high sensitivity nodes. Smaller graphs bloomed, showing individual cadets' effective profiles. Lin's waves had flattened considerably. A few others showed similar compression. Is this necessarily bad? Someone asked. Reduced volatility could mean fewer incidents, better focus. If it were voluntary, perhaps, Helven said. If someone had opted in to a calming field. But this is non-consensual and pervasive. And... They hesitated. And? Shael prompted. Helven brought up another overlay. This is the Academy's ambient field last month, they said. And this? They tapped a separate data set, tagged from an external source. Is a recorded resonance pattern from the Mind Siege at Kethar Prime. The two lines were not identical, but there was a resemblance in their curvature, in the way they smoothed toward a dominant frequency. A siege event? Wren repeated. You're suggesting we are under attack. I am suggesting, Helven said carefully, that we should consider the possibility of a sentient or semi-sentient field attempting to align our ThoughtNet to its preferred pattern. On Kethar, the entity in question amplified despair to render the population docile. Here, the signature is different, more like enforced moderation. But the mechanism feels similar. Mental pathogen, someone muttered. Excellent. There has been no drop in cognitive performance, objected a tactical AI. No evidence of mass delusion. The cadets attend class, complete assignments, socialize. While feeling less, Vel said. Their sparks were dim even here. Less joy, less fear, less anger. You may not consider that a problem. I do. The entity at Kethar required a carrier, Shael said. A focal mind to anchor itself. Do you see anything similar here? Helven's eyes flicked to one of the floating panels. A black wireframe spun slowly in the air. Mara's lattice. I see the opposite, they said. Everywhere the net touches, the pattern appears. There is only one place where it does not. The black wireframe turned, still stubbornly empty. Cadet Rios, Shael said. Yes, Helven said. Our stable interference. The entity's pattern washes around her and leaves a wake of disrupted alignment. It does not like her, or cannot see her. I am not sure which is worse. Could she be its source? Someone asked. If she were, the pattern would be strongest near her, Helven said. It is not. It is strongest in high-sensitivity clusters, cadets like Lynn. Those who listen hardest are hearing something we did not put there. So what is it? Wren asked. Parasite, stray god, malignant algorithm. We do not have enough data, Helvin said. Yet, Shale's mask reflected 20 different fractal graphs. Options? Shut down the ThoughtNet, suggested a security officer. Isolate the academy. Impossible, countered a systems engineer. Too many structures rely on low-level cognitive coordination, gravity adjustments, environmental harmony fields, clock synchronization. We can dampen, but not cut. Even if we could, Vel said, we would be rendering half the student body functionally disabled. Their training, their coping strategies, their very sense of self is woven into the net. And if we do nothing? Another voice asked. Then we risk becoming aligned, Helvin said, in ways we do not understand, by something we cannot name. Shael was silent for a moment. The council will have to be informed, they said at last. In the meantime, increased monitoring, restrict large-scale resonance exercises, inform instructors to watch for behavioral uniformity. And Rios? Wren asked. Flagged, Helvin said. More than she already is. She may be our only relatively neutral terrain. Shale's head tilted. Terrain? Helvin looked at the black wireframe, turning and turning, stubbornly refusing to resolve. If something is moving through the net, they said, we may need a place where it cannot hide, or a place it is forced to cross. The next 2 days tasted like cardboard. Mara might not have been attuned enough to see the net's graphs, but she could read people. And people were off. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just smoothed. The loudest cadets in her cohort still argued during tactical sim, but their barbs were blunter, their peaks of outrage shorter. The ones who usually bounced between giddy enthusiasm and existential dread now hovered in a narrow band of weary okayness. Instructor Krev's close-quarters drill produced bruises on everyone, including Mara, but no one snapped. No one cursed beyond a perfunctory grunt. No one stormed off the mat like she'd seen last week. It's like someone turned the academy's volume down, Kor said quietly as they walked to lunch. Maybe everyone's just tired, Mara said. It's been a rough month. Maybe, he said. But Lynn hasn't made a single pun in 2 days. That's not tired. That's ominous. He wasn't wrong. Lynn's usual sardonic commentary had shrunk to one-word answers. Their eyes were duller, tendrils sluggish. In the refectory, they picked at food without enthusiasm. Still dreaming? Mara asked, sliding into the seat beside them. Yes, Lynn said. Same corridor? Kor asked. Lynn hesitated. It changed, they said. Now there are others walking with me. At first I thought they were. They gestured vaguely. You know, dream people. But I recognized faces this morning. Who? Mara asked. Second year from tactical analysis. One of the medical bill interns, a maintenance tech. They were all calm. Too calm. The doors didn't bother them. And you? Kor said. Lynn's tendrils twitched. I tried to break the pattern. To run the other way. The corridor twisted. Put me back where it wanted me. I woke up with nosebleeds. Mara's stomach dropped. Have you told Wren? She asked. Yes, Lynn said. They recorded everything. They said, we are observing a systemic anomaly. They said not to panic. You're panicking, Kor observed gently. Yes, Lynn said again. And the worst part is, there is a place in me that doesn't want to. That wants to let the corridor happen. To stop fighting. It feels so easy. Mara reached across the table without thinking, and put her hand over Lynn's. Lynn flinched. Not away from her, away from something else. "It's quieter when I sit near you," Lynn whispered. "Do you know that?" Mara shook her head. "It's like—" Lynn searched for words. "Like the net stutters. The corridor has a glitch. The doors flicker. I hate it. But I also—" Their eyes closed briefly. "It hurts. The silence around you. But it's real. I'd forgotten what real felt like." Mara's throat was suddenly too tight for sarcasm. "I'm going to talk to Helvin," she said. "There has to be something. Some protocol." "You think the faculty don't know?" Lynn asked, opening their eyes. "They know. They're watching. But they're afraid to move. What if they rip the net, and we all fall through?" Core's lower hands knotted together. "We're first years," he said. "We're not supposed to fix existential threats in term as one." "File a complaint with the universe," Mara said automatically. It didn't make them laugh this time. Helvin's office sat at the intersection of 3 ThoughtNet nodes, a geometry that made Mara's head ache if she looked at the ceiling too long. He waved her in without preamble. "You're later than I expected," he said. "Sorry," she said. "I left my heroic savior complex in my other uniform." Helvin's mouth twitched. "Sit." She did, on the edge of a floating chair that adjusted its shape to her posture. The walls were covered in shifting diagrams, node maps, graphs, resonance patterns, all updating in real time. One stood out. It was a simplified outline of the Academy's net, a glowing web of lines and nodes. Over it, a faint, pulsing overlay washed back and forth like a tide, the smoothing pattern. Near one edge, a small, dark patch broke the flow. The overlay slid around it, like water around a rock. She didn't need a label to know what it was. "You're using my invasive species status as a visual aid now," she said. "I should charge rent." "Consider it extra credit," Helvin said. "You have noticed the changes?" "Hard to miss when my friends start talking like bad meditation apps," she said. "Lynn's dreaming corridors with other people in them. Core's anxious enough to make me look laid back. That's an achievement." "Yes," Helvin said. "The entity is escalating." "Entity," she repeated. "So we're going with invasion and not oops, we broke the net." "We are still cataloging possibilities," Helvin said. "But whether this is a pathogen, a weapon, or a side effect of some cosmic phenomenon, the result is the same for our purposes. The net's natural variability is being suppressed by a foreign pattern." "And you can't just wash it out?" she asked. "Run a counter signal? Detox the psychic pipes?" Helvin sighed. "This is not a machine you can flush with solvent. The net is emergent. We can modulate it, but we cannot simply overwrite a pattern without also overwriting the minds entangled in it." "That sounds suboptimal," Mara said. "Quite," Helvin agreed. "However, we have observed something promising." He tapped a control. The overlay zoomed in on the small dark patch, her, and the currents around it. "Where you are," he said, "the pattern ripples. It does not break entirely, but it frays. The entity's alignment loses coherence in your wake." "Like I'm shedding static," she said. "Charming." "Like you are an immunological irritant," Helvin said. "A splinter the net cannot absorb. Anywhere you spend prolonged time with others, their susceptibility decreases." "That would have been nice to know before I sat on the opposite side of the room from Lynn all week," Mara said, heat creeping into her voice. "I informed Vel," Helvin said. "Vel informed Ren. The speed at which information flows is not always as fast as we would like. We are working under several constraints, not least of which is the Council's reluctance to acknowledge a threat without incontrovertible proof that can be explained to politicians." Let me guess, she said. They can't feel it from their comfy, insulated planets. Helvin's eyes were unreadable. Some can. Most cannot. That is, not new. She rubbed her forehead. So what now? You assign me to stroll the halls radiating disruptive vibes? Please stand within 2 meters of the Terran for best results? The thought has occurred, Helvin said, but passive irritation will not be enough. The entity is adapting. The corridors in Lin's dreams? That is pattern consolidation. It is building roots, familiarizing itself with our cognitive architecture. Using our own minds as practice mazes, Mara said. Great. We have to disrupt it more directly, Helvin said, which brings us to the part of this conversation you will not like. Fantastic, she said, because so far I've been having a wonderful time. Helvin folded his hands. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost nervous. At Kethar, he said, the only successful resistance came from individuals whose cognitive patterns were sufficiently alien that the entity could not fully map them. They did not block it entirely, but they could create knots, turbulence, places where its flow doubled back on itself. Like rocks in a river, Mara said. Yes, they slowed it, redirected it, bought time for mechanical evacuations. Let me guess, she said. You don't have any Cathari in stock, so you're stuck with me. Helvin's mouth tightened. The Cathari perished when their system collapsed. We have only their recordings. But yes, you are, functionally similar in net terms. A zone of poor resolution. We believe that if we could encourage the entity to focus on you, temporarily, we could get a clearer reading on its architecture, perhaps even trap a portion of it in a closed loop. She stared at him. You want to dangle me in front of a psychic predator to see what happens, she said. Not in those words, Helvin said. But broadly, yes. And if it decides I'm the tastiest strange thing it's ever seen? She asked. What then? Do you get to add a footnote to my file? Terran, deceased, died for science. Ren will be monitoring, Helvin said. We will set strict abort thresholds. We will not allow you to be consumed. You can't even measure my thresholds properly, she said. Half your sensors read me as static. That has improved since the room, Helvin said. The more data we have, the better we can approximate, and you have something most of our cadets lack. Terrible impulse control, she suggested. Experience, he said, and a clearly demonstrated reluctance to surrender to despair, even when that would be the simpler option. She thought of the door again, the smell of smoke, the voice asking her why she hadn't said terminate sooner. You want to use my refusal to give up as a leash, she said. I want to use your refusal to give up as a lifeline, Helvin said, for you and for everyone else. Silence stretched. The diagrams on the walls shifted and pulsed, lines smoothing, flattening, smoothing again. This is insane, she said finally. I am a first-year cadet. I still get lost in the East Wing. You want me to play tug-of-war with a mind large enough to nudge a whole academy's mood? Yes, Helvin said simply. She laughed once, harsh. Does the dean know about this? She asked. Shale? Vel? Or is this your personal let's poke the cosmic bear side project? The dean will be informed, Helvin said. Ren is already on board, with conditions. Vel, suspects, and is not pleased. The council, if we involve them, will either forbid it or commandeer it. Neither outcome appeals. You're asking me to consent to something you might not be allowed to do, she said. I am asking you, Helvin said, because I will not do this without your consent. Council authorization or not. Minds are not ordinance. If you say no, we will find another way. A slower, less direct way, with greater risk to others and lower risk to you. Her jaw clenched. That's manipulative, she said. It is honest, he replied. You are not obligated to sacrifice yourself to make my graphs happier. But understand the stakes. She stood abruptly and paced to the other side of the room, ignoring the way the net's hum shifted as she moved. The black patch on the holographic academy followed her like a shadow. If I say yes, she said, facing the diagrams, what's the plan? Carefully constructed, Helvin said. We would not throw you into the main net. We'd set up a controlled resonance chamber, a smaller field, with Ren and Vel anchoring. We would invite the entity to explore a localized perturbation, your presence, while the rest of the academy remains shielded as much as possible. We observe. We learn. At the first sign of you losing yourself, we cut every connection. And if it doesn't want to play? She asked. What if it ignores me? Then we lose nothing, he said. And we keep looking. She thought of Lynn's eyes in the refectory, of the corridor with 2 even doors, of the way the net's smoothing field had brushed against her and slid away like a hand finding no grip. She also thought of Kethar's recordings. She'd watched them after Helvin mentioned them, morbid curiosity winning over good sense. An entire city going quiet, citizens walking calmly into floodwaters because the despair in their heads wasn't theirs. It hurts, Lynn had said, but it's real. I'd forgotten what real felt like. She turned back to Helvin. I don't want to be your hero, she said. Good, he said. Heroes are reckless. I need someone who knows exactly how afraid they are and does the thing anyway. That's not better, she said. It is, he said, for my purposes. She snorted. Of course it is. He waited. She stared at the black patch spinning on the Hollow Academy map. It looked small. It wasn't. If this goes wrong, she said, and I end up with something in my head that isn't me, then, Helvin said softly, we will get it out. Or failing that, learn to live with it. You have, after all, considerable experience cohabiting with unwelcome tenants. Flattery will get you nowhere, she said. Flattery is not my strength, he replied. Another silence. Fine, she said at last. I'll do it. Helvin's shoulders relaxed a fraction. Thank you. But, she added, jabbing a finger at him, I want conditions. Name them, he said. 1. Ren runs the kill switch, not you. You'll let this run too long to collect data. They won't. Helvin's mouth tightened, but he nodded. Agreed. 2. Lynn gets told. Not the details, just enough so they know why things might feel worse for a bit. Ren will decide what can be ethically disclosed, he said, but I will urge transparency. 3, she said. If I say stop, you stop. No arguing. No, just a bit longer. I know what my breaking point feels like, better than your machines do. I already accounted for that, he said. Consent, remember? People say that, she said. Then forget when it's inconvenient. I will not, he said. And there was something in his voice that made her believe him, despite herself. She blew out a breath. When? She asked. Soon, he said. The entity is still exploring, not entrenched. The longer we wait, the more familiar it becomes with us. Great, she said. I'll clear a slot in my calendar between combat drills and voluntarily antagonize an unknown psychic force. Helvin's lips quirked. You cope with humor, he said. Good. Keep doing that. It will make Ren's job marginally easier. She headed for the door. Mara, he said quietly. She paused with her hand on the panel. What? We do not expect you to win, he said. We expect you to learn. That is all. She smiled without humor. You're at a school, she said. You always expect us to learn. You just don't usually bet the entire academy's mental integrity on the outcome. Not usually, he agreed. Lucky me, she said. As she stepped into the corridor, the ThoughtNet's hum pressed against her, smooth and insistent, like a crowd holding its breath. She pushed back without thinking, a small flare of private irritation at the whole situation. The hum shivered, snapped, and reformed around her. Somewhere else in the academy, Lynn jerked awake from a microsleep at their desk, heart racing, dream corridor flickering like a broken projection. For one instant, one of the doors in that impossible hallway looked wrong. The smooth, seamless surface showed a hairline crack. Then the smoothing tide washed over it again. In a quiet sublayer of the net, where diagnostic routines wandered like blind fish, a new flag appeared. External pattern, strengthening local anomaly, activated potential countermeasure. Terran node, Ryu 3. Mara didn't see the flag. She just felt the corridor ahead of her stretch a little longer than it should as she walked, like the academy itself was bracing. Bargain with the shadow. They picked a room that didn't technically exist. It wasn't on the cadet maps. The corridor that led to it kinked in a way the academy's geometry normally avoided. A slight, disorienting twist that made Mara's stomach do an unhappy flip the first time she walked it. Hidden lab, Cor had whispered when she told him where to meet her afterward. Very ominous. 10 out of 10. Now she stood, outside the unmarked door, palms damp, trying not to think about what the ThoughtNet was doing above her head. The hum had changed again. It wasn't just smooth anymore. It was thick, layered, like someone had poured honey over the entire academy's nervous system and was waiting for everyone to stop struggling. "Come in," Helvin's voice said. The door irised open. Inside, the walls curved gently inward, their usual thought conduits shrouded. Physical cables ran in tidy bundles from ceiling to floor, feeding into a ring of consoles. In the center, a low platform waited, surrounded by faintly glowing arcs. Dr. Wren stood by one of the consoles, forelimbs moving with brisk efficiency. Their mandibles clicked softly as they adjusted settings. Vel floated near the far wall, their translucent body dim. Sparks gathered close. Mara stepped in and let the door close behind her. "So," she said, "this is cozy." "Containment chamber," Wren corrected. "We are dampening ThoughtNet connectivity to a narrow band anchored here. The rest of the academy will experience only residual fluctuations." "Translation," Mara said. "If this goes wrong, only I and an unlucky handful of faculty get our brains scrambled." "That is an oversimplification," Wren said. "But not entirely inaccurate," Helvin added. Mara gave him a look. "Really selling it, Professor." He inclined his head. "Last chance to walk away." She thought of Lynn's flat eyes, of the too even dreams, of the way the Academy's arguments sounded lately. Measured, reasonable, wrong. "Not really," she said. "If I walk away and this thing wins, I still live here. Might as well get a say." Vel's sparks flickered, a soft show of respect. "We will anchor the local field," they said. "Wren will watch your physiology. I will watch your resonance. Helvin will watch the data. Everyone has a job." "Your job," Wren added, "is to stay as present as you can. If you feel yourself slipping, if you cannot tell memory from now, say the word." "Terminate," Mara said. "Yes," Wren said. "That one." Helvin gestured to the central platform. "Lie down, please. The arcs will maintain field cohesion around you. Think of them as scaffolding." "Thought scaffolding for my questionable life choices," Mara said, but she stepped up and sat, then swung her legs up and lay back. The platform was warmer than it looked. The arcs hummed softly, like sleeping engines. Wren attached a few sensors to her temples, wrists, and chest. They felt surprisingly light. "You have done something like this before," they observed. "Medical scans on Kalin," Mara said. "Field neuromesh hookups. Nothing this fancy." "Fancy is not always better," Vel murmured. Mara stared up at the ceiling, at the faint trace of hidden conduits. "Okay," she said. "Let's poke the cosmic bear." Ren moved to their console. Vel drifted closer, hovering within arm's reach. "Beginning isolation," Ren said. "Local net field down to 10%. Broader network attenuated." The background hum receded, like someone closing a door on a crowded room. For the first time since she'd arrived at Elthar, Mara felt almost alone. Not quite. There was still a faint whisper. The Academy's physical systems. The low-level mesh that kept gravity smooth and air balanced. But the emotional noise of thousands of minds faded to a distant murmur. "Better?" Helvin asked. "Quieter," she said. "Not sure that's better." "Now," Vel said, "we will build a small field between us. Just enough to make a lantern." "A what?" Mara asked. "A localized disturbance in the dark," Vel said simply. "Something for the entity to investigate." Mara closed her eyes. She felt Vel's touch first, a gentle brush, cool and precise, like fingers skimming the surface of a pond. Ren's presence was a firmer shape behind that, a steady, clinical concern. "Anchor," Vel reminded her. "Breath, body, here and now." She anchored. "Now I will open a narrow channel to the wider net," Vel said. "Just enough to let our little lantern be seen." The hum at the edges of her awareness shifted. A faint aperture opened, no wider than a thought, but enough. "Do you feel it?" Helvin's voice was distant now, filtered through speakers. "The smoothing pattern?" She did. It came like a suggestion, rather than a shove. A soft hand on the back of the neck. Relax. Let go. Why strain? Why hurt? It slid over Vel and Ren's carefully constructed field, trying to pull their rhythms toward its own median. Vel brightened, sparks flaring outward, resisting. "Hold," they murmured. "Let it see. Do not let it steer." Mara felt it brush against her. The sensation was odd. Not impact, not collision. More like two misaligned frequencies momentarily overlapping. Where it touched her, it slipped. Not away completely. She felt it catch, then stutter, then surge around her, like water hitting a rock and forming eddies. "There," Helvin said quietly. "We have its attention." The pressure increased. The soft suggestion hardened into something closer to intent. "Calm," it whispered without words. "Level. Surrender the spikes. You are tired. Let me carry the peaks and troughs. I will make you smooth." Mara's jaw clenched. "Talk to me," Ren said. "What are you perceiving?" Tide," she said. "It wants to iron everything flat. Not out of malice, just because that's its shape." "And you?" Helvin asked. "How are you responding?" "Badly," she said. "On instinct." She could feel the familiar reflexes rising. Slam the doors, lock down, present as little surface as possible. Lita's training in the bunker. The hard-learned lesson that if you didn't give the panic anywhere to go, it would eventually burn itself out behind your ribs. "Don't clamp down completely," Vel said. "We need contact, or we learn nothing. If I open the door too far, everything behind it will rush out," she said. "Not far," Ren said. "Just enough." She breathed. Very carefully she found one of the smaller internal doors again. Not the Kalen one, not the worst of the pits. A less lethal cupboard, an old embarrassment, a minor fear, something survivable. She eased the bar a fraction. The tide pushed. For a moment, her embarrassment, miscalculated trajectory in a training sim, slamming into a wall in front of an audience, surfaced. The entity touched it. The feeling changed. The flush of shame flattened, the spike smoothed. Her body relaxed, just a little. "Oh," the entity seemed to say. "This is noise. I can quiet that." See? Better. It was tempting. For an instant, the idea of all her ugly, jagged feelings being filed down into manageable curves was intoxicating. No more sleepless nights replaying doors that didn't open. No more adrenaline spikes at sudden noises. Just steady. Ren's voice cut through the cotton. "Your heart rate is dropping too fast. Stay with us, Rios. Name something in the room." "Platform," she said. The word felt distant in her mouth. "Arcs. Vel hovering like an anxious jellyfish. You glaring at graphs." Helvin made a small sound that might have been a choked laugh. Good. Humor. Still her. The tide pressed again, this time testing the edges of a deeper door. Something hot and bright flared beneath it. Rage and grief and the bone-deep exhaustion of surviving too many things that should have killed her. The entity recoiled, just for a second. Then it pressed back, harder. That too, it wanted. To smooth, to level, to absorb. Mara saw, in a flicker, what it might feel like if she let it. The roar in her chest quieted. The constant itch of vigilance eased. Her memories lay still, like photographs in an album instead of knives. All you have to do, it implied, is stop fighting. "No," she said. The pressure increased. "Rios," Ren said. "Report." "It's offering peace," she said through gritted teeth, "without asking permission." "Do you believe it?" Helvin asked. "Yes," she said. "That's the problem." Because it wasn't lying. Not exactly. It wanted equilibrium. It didn't care about her individuality, but it didn't derive pleasure from crushing it. It was like a thermostat trying to eliminate drafts. She thought of Kethar. Calm citizens, walking into floodwater. "No," she repeated, louder. "That's not peace. That's erasure." The tide pushed harder, offended. A low warning tone sounded somewhere near Ren. "Neural synchronization rising," they called. Her patterns beginning to entrain. "Rios," Helvin said. "Remember the room. Remember the door. What did you decide there?" "The doing nothing was worse," she gasped. "Yes," he said. "You chose pain and effort over passive inevitability. This is the same question. Different scale." The entity shoved that memory at her now. The helplessness, the strain, the failure. It smoothed the edges, offered to take the guilt. She let herself feel all of it. Unsmoothed. It burned. The tide flinched. "There it is," she thought wildly. "You don't like it when it spikes up voluntarily, do you? You want it when it's uncontrolled, when it's messy." She grabbed for that spike, that raw choice, and held it up like a live wire. Have a look, she thought at the presence. Really look. Images weren't quite the right medium here, but something like them flowed. A mash of human moments. Soldiers in trenches telling jokes with shaking hands. A medic running toward an explosion. An old woman learning to walk again after her third surgery. A kid on a flooded street laughing as they pulled a stranger onto their makeshift raft. The feelings were messy, terrified, stubborn, ridiculous, irrational. The entity pulsed back, confused, wasteful, inefficient, effective, she shot back, for staying alive. The tide tried to smooth them. They did not smooth. They bent, they screamed, they cracked, but they did not flatten to its preferred curve. Every time it pressed one down, another popped up at an angle, like weeds between paving stones. "What's happening?" Ren demanded, watching a cascade of numbers on their console. "The entity is confused," Vel said slowly. "It is encountering non-compliant patterns." "Her amygdala activity is off the charts," Ren said. "Terminate? Wait, Helvin said. Look. On the main display, a representation of the local field showed two overlapping shapes, the smooth tide and a jagged, flickering waveform anchored in the center. Where they intersected, interference patterns formed, a lace of knots and loops. Those knots did not move with the tide. They held. It's looping, Helvin breathed. It's catching its own dampening feedback. We're making it trip over itself. Inside, Mara felt it too. The entity pressed. Her jagged human refusal broke its wave into smaller ripples. Those ripples collided with each other, creating tiny standing waves, pockets of turbulence the entity had not intended. What are you? It pulsed, and for the first time she felt something like its curiosity directed entirely at her. Tired, she thought, and very, very bad at doing what I'm told. She felt it reach toward that, not to hurt, exactly, but to understand, to model. In that instant of focused attention, she saw it more clearly, not as a voice, but as a pattern, vast and thin, stretching through networks like theirs, a web of smoothing algorithms and parasitic instincts wrapped around a core directive: reduce variance, prevent catastrophic spikes, maintain homeostasis. Once, maybe, it had been a tool, a regulator for some ancient civilization's overstressed mind web. Over time, it had slipped free of its creators, flowing along the paths they'd built, doing what it knew: damp everything, level everything. They died, she thought at it, letting the knowledge of Kethar and a dozen lesser incidents leak through. Cities gone quiet, cultures losing their edges, safety purchased with all the sharp bits filed off. Their spikes were too high, it answered, not in words, but in a sense of inevitability. They burned. I cooled. It was balance. You're not balance, she pushed back. You're numbness. Another spike of irritation. Spite, almost. It pressed at her core again, and this time she felt a sliver slip through. A thin thread of the smoothing algorithm hooking into one of her deeper doors. Pain danced down her spine. For a heartbeat, the room returned, not as memory, but as possibility. She saw herself letting go, letting it take everything. No, she snarled, aloud and in. The word wasn't magic. It didn't throw the entity off by itself, but it gave her something to push from. She grabbed the thin thread with the stubborn, stupid human part of her that had pulled on an unwinnable door and wrapped it around her fist. Fine, she thought at it. You want in? You can't have the whole thing. Just this. She yanked. For an instant their patterns overlapped more deeply. The chamber vanished. She was nowhere and everywhere at once, threaded through corridors of thought that weren't hers, riding along smooth surfaces, feeling thousands of tiny, flattened emotional profiles pass through her like static. She tasted panic, blunted to worry, elation dulled to contentment, grief softened to background hum. She wanted to scream. Instead, she did something worse. She laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and wild, and full of all the places in her that refused to stay inside nice, neat lines. The entity recoiled, its pattern shuddering. Around the academy, several cadets jerked awake from naps they hadn't meant to take, hearts racing for reasons they couldn't name. In the chamber, Wren's hand hovered over the hard abort control. Her vitals are off map, they said. Heart rate chaotic, neural signatures overlapping. Her cognitive coherence? Helvin demanded. Wren hesitated. Holding, they admitted. Barely. Then we hold, Helvin said. 10 more seconds. No more. Vel's sparks flared nearly white. You are all mad. Possibly, Helvin said. But the data is not worth a mind, Vel snapped. 7, Wren counted. 6. Inside, Mara dug in. You don't understand, she thought at the entity, wrapping its thread tighter. You think the only way to prevent us from breaking is to stop us from bending. But bending is how we live. She showed it more. A firefighter stepping into smoke, knowing their lungs would scar. A climber, roping, in fingers blistered. A child studying in a war zone, ear tuned for sirens. Useless, the entity pulsed back, bewildered. Damage, waste. Growth, she shot back. Risk, choice. It could not process choice. It wanted equilibrium. She could feel it starting to pull back, seeking easier territory, more compliant minds. But her fist around its thread created friction. As it withdrew, it left a filament behind, anchored in her. Mine now, she thought grimly. Ren hit the abort. The world snapped. The tide vanished. Mara gasped, arching off the platform. Every sensor alarm in the room shrieked, her muscles locked in a full-body tremor that felt like trying to hold a live cable. Then Vel slammed a dampening field around her. Ren injected something cold and sharp into her arm. And everything crashed to black. She woke to quiet. Not the smoothed quiet. Real quiet. The sort that had edges. The medbay lights were dimmed. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and Vel's mineral salt scent. She lay on a soft mattress instead of a metal platform. Someone had wiped the dried blood from her upper lip. "You are very annoying," Ren's voice said from her left. She turned her head. They sat in a chair beside her bed, tablet in hand, eyes glittering. "Good morning to you too," she croaked. "It is evening," Ren said. "You were out for 8 hours, which is 8 fewer than I feared." "What happened?" she asked. Ren's mandibles clicked. "You told a foreign psychic entity to go to hell," they said, "and it appears to have taken partial offense." "Partial?" she repeated. "Academy-wide smoothing has decreased significantly," Ren said. "Affect variability is up. Dreams are less structured. The entity's pattern is still present but disrupted. Your reckless little knot is holding." She closed her eyes briefly. "Lin?" she asked. "Reports fewer corridor dreams," Ren said. "More normal nightmares. Progress." "And me?" she asked. "Apart from the stylish fainting." Ren hesitated. "You have a guest," they said. She stared at them. "Be more specific," she said, very calmly. Ren tapped their tablet. A hollow brain appeared again, nodes glowing. One region, in the central networks, glimmered with an odd, shifting pattern, like light on oil. "You pulled a filament of the entity's pattern with you when we cut connection," they said. "It is not fully integrated, more like a splinter in your cognitive structure. It does not appear to be dominating, yet. It is, however, very interested." She swallowed. "Interested in what?" "In you," Ren said. "Your memories, your refusal to flatten. It is studying you, I think. The way you are studying it." "Can I get it removed?" she asked. "Not without risking more damage than it currently causes," Ren said frankly. "What we can do is monitor, support, teach you to set boundaries. You are, or, not the only being in the universe who shares mental space with something inconvenient." Her laugh was more of a rasp. "I'm becoming a boarding house." "A shared apartment," Ren said. "Unwanted, but not necessarily unmanageable." She stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "I can feel it," she said finally. Ren's head tipped. "How?" "Like a draft," she said slowly. "At the back of my thoughts. Every time I spike emotionally, it pricks up. But it's not steering, just watching." "For now," Ren said. "For now," she echoed. The curtain rustled. Helvin stepped in, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. Several of the glowing lines on his arms flickered unevenly. "You look terrible," Mara told him. I have been arguing with the council, he said. Their idea of a reasonable response is to turn the academy into a quarantine bubble and study you through a microscope for the next 5 years. Tempting, she said. All that attention. He ignored that. How do you feel? Like I've been run over by a concept, she said. Also hungry. That's a good sign, Ren said. If she were losing herself, appetite would be one of the first things to go. Helvin watched her, his reflective eyes unreadable. You did well, he said. Don't, she said automatically. If you say heroic, I'm checking myself out and throwing myself into the nearest airlock. Foolhardy then, he amended. But successful. Did we get your precious data? She asked. Yes, he said quietly. Enough to model the entity's basic architecture. Enough to develop counterharmonics, localized shields, early warning markers. Enough to prove to the council that this was real. And they're going to… What? She asked. Write a strongly worded memo to the universe. They are going to fund a dedicated cognitive security division, Helvin said, here and at other institutions. They are going to classify the entity as a Tier 3 mind hazard. They are going to argue for years about jurisdiction. But in the meantime, we will teach people how to recognize the pattern, how to resist it. He looked at her. And we will use you, he said, as a case study in how not to break when something tries to file you down. That sounds awful, she said. It pays terribly, he agreed. She smiled, then winced as her head throbbed. The entity, she said. Does it know what happened? It knows it was hurt, Helvin said. Confused, entangled. It will be more cautious with us now, which is both good and bad. Bad because, she prompted. Because it will stop being clumsy, he said, and start being clever. Great, she said. Can't wait. Ren rose. I will order food, they said. Proper food, not nutrient paste. Your body has work to do. When they left, Helvin moved closer, his voice lowering. In case I was not clear earlier, he said. Thank you. She looked at him, at the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes. I didn't do it for you, she said. I know, he said. That is why it worked. She exhaled, long and slow. In the back of her mind, something shifted, watching. She thought at it, very clearly. We are not done talking about boundaries. It didn't answer, but it didn't push, either, for now. New standards. The academy felt louder, not in decibels, the halls sounded much the same, but the emotional air had regained its texture. Mara noticed it first in the refectory, 3 days after leaving the medbay. Someone at a nearby table told a joke, and instead of the mild ripple of amusement she'd grown used to, laughter spiked. A few cadets genuinely cackling, one groaning dramatically, another rolling their eyes in theatrical disgust. The net carried those little flares, and they didn't all get trimmed to the same polite curve. It was like hearing static again after days of white noise. Better? Cor asked, watching her watch the room. Messier, she said. So yes. He grinned, all 4 hands wrapped around his cup of something steaming. Lynn says the corridor dreams are down to once a week, and now the doors lead to actual classrooms. That's progress, I guess. Less eldritch, more bureaucratic, Mara said. Truly, we've tamed the horror. Lynn slid into the seat opposite them. Trey balanced carefully. Don't mock bureaucracy, they said. At least it comes with forms you can ignore. Their tendrils had more life in them again. The glassiness in their eyes had faded, replaced by their usual wary focus. How's your head? They asked Mara. Occupied, Mara said, but manageable. You really have something in there? Lin asked cautiously. A fragment, Mara said. A very nosy, very confused fragment. What does it feel like? Kor asked, fascinated. Like sharing a brain with an overbearing aunt who thinks all emotions should be tablecloth flat, Mara said. Whenever I get too worked up, I can feel it, twitch. And then? Lin asked. And then I think about something that makes me angry and hopeful at the same time, she said. It doesn't know what to do with that. Lin huffed a small laugh. Weaponized ambivalence. Impressive. New Terran battle doctrine, Mara said. Step 1, confuse the psychic pathogen. Step 2, complain about it. Kor's lower hands fidgeted. Helvin said they're designing wards now, he said. Pattern breakers. You'll be teaching them? I'll be answering questions and trying not to turn into a case study illustration, she said. Same difference. Lin's gaze grew more serious. Thank you, they said. Mara shrugged, uncomfortable. It was a group project. You all provided context. I mean it, Lin said. The corridor, whatever it was, felt inevitable, like gravity. And then one night there was a crack in one of the doors. Just a tiny one. Enough to prove it could break. That mattered. Mara looked down at her tray. You're welcome, she said quietly. In the back of her mind, the fragment stirred, pricked by the emotional spike. She let it feel the warmth, the awkward gratitude, the faint embarrassment. It recoiled slightly, unused to positive feelings that weren't smoothed into contentment. Good, she thought at it. Learned something. The council's emissary arrived a week later. They didn't stay long. Mara watched part of the session from the back of the faculty amphitheater, perched in the shadows under a projection node. Technically, she wasn't supposed to be there. Technically, she didn't care. The emissary, a severe-looking being with pale skin and a halo of flickering symbols around their head, sat across from Administrator Shale and a row of faculty, Helvin and Wren among them. Holographic graphs floated between them, the Academy's net before and after the anomaly, waveforms of the entity's pattern, the tight, tangled knots where Mara's interference had thrown it off. We are not asking for panic, Shael said in their smooth, measured way. We are asking for preparation. This will not be the last time an external cognitive field brushes our networks. It may not always be as blunt as this one. And you propose? The emissary asked. A dedicated cognitive security division, Helvin said. Standardized scanning for non-consensual alignment patterns. Training in resilience that goes beyond static shielding. We cannot rely solely on mechanical fire breaks when dealing with mind-borne phenomena. Resilience training for whom? The emissary asked. Telepaths? Empaths. For everyone who lives in a net, Helvin said. If Kethar taught us anything, it is that your vulnerability does not correlate neatly with your talents. Sometimes the strongest shield is the ability to open and close intentionally, not the inability to be touched. You wish to teach people to be like your Terran, the emissary said, glancing at a spinning model of Mara's lattice. No, Helvin said. We wish to learn from her and incorporate the useful parts. Her pattern is extreme. Most minds should not have to compress themselves to that degree, but her ability to decide when to bend and when to hold, that is teachable. Wren spoke next, mandibles clicking. Mental health protocols must adapt, they said. We have, for too long, treated complete guard as the ideal. Minds that could not be read were considered safest. We are discovering that absolute opacity breeds its own dangers. Unprocessed trauma is fertile ground for anything that likes to take root. You want us to encourage vulnerability, the emissary said, as if the word tasted odd. We want you to encourage informed choice, Wren said. Teach people to recognize what is theirs, what is not, and to say no without needing perfect walls. "And if people refuse?" the emissary asked. "Then they refuse," Helvin said. "Consent remains consent. But at least they refuse knowing the stakes." The emissary was quiet for a moment, symbols around their head flickering faster. "We will consider your recommendations," they said finally. "In the meantime, the Council expects regular reports on the entity fragment's behavior within Cadet Rios." Mara rolled her eyes in the dark. Of course. The first time she used the fragment on purpose, it was an accident. She was sitting in Foundations, now renamed Applied Collective Dynamics, because someone in administration had decided the old title was insufficiently alarming, trying to follow Vel's explanation of localized field knots, when a wave of inexplicable calm rolled through the room. Vel froze mid-sentence. "That, they said sharply, was not me." Mara felt it too, the soft hand at the back of the neck, the invitation to relax, to stop worrying about the complicated diagrams, and just let it all wash over them. Several cadets visibly sagged, one's eyes glazed. The fragment in her head perked up like a hunting dog smelling prey. Without thinking, she grabbed it. Not physically, obviously, but she focused on that filament, on the way it tugged toward the smoothing field, eager to rejoin its larger self. "No." She yanked. The localized calm snapped near her, like a soap bubble popping. The cadets closest to her blinked, shoulders jerking. Vel's sparks flared. "Hold," they said. "Do not follow that feeling. Anchor." The wave rolled on, weaker now, dissipating as other instructors across the academy threw up emergency counter signals. Mara sagged back against her cushion. Her heart pounded, but it wasn't the entity's rhythm. It was hers. Vel floated closer, eyes bright. "You did something," they said quietly. "It tried to pull," Mara said. "I pulled back." Vel's sparks flickered, half alarmed, half impressed. "Be careful. Tug of war with an oceans. Risky." "Maybe," she said. "But it's better than letting it drag everyone out to sea." After class, Lynn cornered her in the hallway. "That was you," they said. Not a question. "Partly," she said. "Mostly it was Vel and the others. I just tripped it." "I felt the corridor tilt," Lynn said, like the floor in a dream suddenly slanted the other way. "Good tilt or bad tilt?" Mara asked. Lynn's tendrils curled. "Uncomfortable," they said. "But less wrong." She could live with that. Counseling sessions with Ren became a regular part of her schedule. They weren't like the appointed sessions back on Kalan, where everyone sat in a circle sharing feelings while the station creaked under bombardment. Ren was too sharp, too sardonic to let it turn into group therapy cliches. They talked about doors, about fire breaks, about how to tell the difference between healthy boundaries and airtight bunkers. "You built your inner structures for a war zone," Ren said one afternoon, tapping her temple lightly with a stylus. "They served you there. Here, they need renovation." "Can I keep the load-bearing walls?" she asked. "Yes," they said. "The problem is not that you have walls. It is that you have welded them shut and thrown away the schematics." They had her practice small openings, like in Vel's class, but under stricter control. Not for the entity's benefit this time. For hers. Let a little grief through, a little anger, a little joy. The fragment reacted each time, twitching at the prospect of fresh variants. She learned to push back without slamming it completely. To say, "You may watch, but you may not edit." It was like living with a nosy neighbor who peeked through the curtains, but never came in. Sometimes, when she was very tired, it whispered temptations. "I could make this easier. You are so sharp. Let me sand a corner." She'd think about Lynn's corridors, about Kether, about the smooth gray calm that wasn't really calm at all. No, she'd think. Easier is not the same as better. It grumbled, in the way abstract smoothing algorithms grumble, and retreated. For now. Graduation was still years away, but the academy was already changing. New courses appeared in the schedule. Cognitive security fundamentals, ethics of shared minds, advanced emotional modulation. Upper year cadets grumbled, but they took them. Lynn joined a research cohort mapping early warning signs of non-consensual alignment. Core signed up for a practicum designing resonance anchors, small devices and mental techniques to help people hold on to their own rhythms in a storm. Mara found herself pulled into seminars she never expected to attend. Her presence requested not to be poked at, but to demonstrate. This is what we used to think was the ideal, Helvin said in one lecture, calling up an anonymized lattice that was nearly opaque. No net contact, no emotional data. Unreadable, untouchable. We now understand this is as dangerous as full exposure. When this mind broke, it did so catastrophically, with no warning. He called up another lattice, Mara's, stylized and redacted. It showed the black interference field, but around it, faint, controlled connections, threads she chose to open, patterns she allowed through. This, he said, is messy. It is leaky. It is, in many ways, infuriating to model. But it is also flexible. It can bend under stress and snap back. It can choose when to share and when to hold. This, we are beginning to suspect, is closer to what we should aim for. Hands went up. Questions about privacy, about vulnerability, about who got to decide when to open. Helvin's answers were careful. Wren's guest lectures were blunter. Your mind is not a fortress or a marketplace, they told one group. It is a living thing. Living things need membranes, not walls. Semi-permeable, selective. Rigid ones turn brittle. Mara sat in the back, listening, feeling the fragment in her skull sulk whenever Wren said things like non-consensual smoothing. Good, she thought at it. You're on the wrong side of history. On a clear night, if you could call any night clear on a station suspended above a planet, Mara found herself on one of the outer observation balconies. The air was cool, smelling faintly of metal and ozone. Beyond the railing, the Academy's ring sections glowed, thoughtnet lines tracing a shifting web. Somewhere down there, thousands of minds dreamed, argued, studied, fell in love, panicked over exams. The net hummed around her. Not smooth, not calm, alive. She leaned on the railing and let herself feel it, just a little. The low-grade anxiety of first years, the focused intensity of final term projects, the quiet contentment of someone reading alone in a corner. The fragment stirred, drawn to the flux. You could make this softer, it suggested, its voice still more instinct than language. Less oscillation, less risk. Less everything, she murmured. A pause. It was learning to recognize tone, if not words. You will break, it implied. All of you. Variance leads to fracture. Probably, she said. Eventually. That's how we go. Waste. She smiled faintly. You keep saying that. I keep disagreeing. You fight when you could rest. It pulsed, baffled. I rest too, she said. I laugh. I eat food that disagrees with me. I complain about my instructors. I stand on balconies and talk to invasive mind fragments. That's not nothing. You choose spikes, it insisted. Pain. Sometimes, she said. Sometimes spikes are the only way to climb out of a pit. It didn't understand metaphor yet, but it felt the direction of her feeling. The refusal to let go, tangled with humor and weariness and a strange, brittle joy at still being here. It recoiled slightly, as it always did when she held contradictions too close. Yet you do not collapse, it registered. Observation. Pattern stable, despite variance. Anomaly. Welcome to humans, she said softly. We're walking anomalies. You'll get used to it. She felt it circle warily, like an animal sniffing at a campfire. Tempted by the warmth, wary of the burn. You will die, it said, not with malice, just with the blunt statement of something that to it seemed obvious. Eventually, she agreed. So will the Academy. So will you, probably one day, when the last net goes quiet. That's kind of the point. Point? That it matters what we do in between, she said. How we bend. Who we stand next to. The fragment fell silent. Far below, a bell chimed. No, not chimed. Roared, chimed, chirped, and emitted 3 other sounds calibrated to different species' hearing ranges. Dinner, for those who hadn't already grabbed it. The thought net fluttered with small flares of hunger and anticipation. Mara pushed off the railing. You can keep watching, she told the entity in her head. You might even learn something, but you don't get to decide for us. That's the deal. No deal had been formally made, no contract signed. But inside, she felt it settle, just a fraction, into a begrudging acknowledgement. Not consent, not surrender. An uneasy truce. As she turned to go, the net brushed her with a dozen tiny, accidental touches. Someone's flash of excitement at a solved equation. Lynn's quiet satisfaction at a joke landing well. Core's nervous dread of an upcoming explosives practicum. She let herself feel them, then gently returned to her own center. A mind that cannot be read is not necessarily empty, Helvin had said in one seminar. A mind that can be read and chooses when to open. That is strength. Mara snorted to herself. Could have just said, people who know when to say no and when to say yes are less likely to be hijacked by cosmic smoothing algorithms, she muttered. The fragment twitched, faintly amused despite itself. Maybe, she thought, they were both learning. She headed back inside, into the warm, noisy, gloriously uneven mess of the Academy, carrying her armor, her cracks, and her unwelcome passenger with her. Not unafraid, just unwilling to stop.